Hello, everybody, and we are back live. This is Team Philo Sapiens, and welcome you all to Philo Sapiens, where religion meets reason. And today we have for you Abbas, and there is a guy called, I think his name, as he said, is Flash, if I got it right. And it's a conversation regarding the existence of God and why Islam makes sense and all those. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna review it and see where the arguments fall short from either side, basically. So, since this is an English stream, I have with me Madan. Madan, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm just curious about this particular video that I've only seen a snapshot of, but it seems very interesting because the person that he's talking to identifies himself as a person who studies philosophy. So I would like to see watch this probably even in my spare time. It's a 40-minute video. I don't know if we can get through it in that 40 minutes.
Yeah, let's see how much of it we can actually cover.
Yes.
But we'll try to cover it in its entirety if possible. But I mean, those of you who listen to us very often know that we take it, point by point, and we go in real depth. So might not be possible in just one stream. And if we get a chance, probably we'll do second stream as well. And if we can skip some parts, then we might just do that as well to get to the end. But I did listen to this conversation, and that's why I recommended it to Mahaten as well. And it's an interesting conversation. So because this guy, the Flash guy, seemed really in tune with. I wouldn't say he's like really top-notch philosopher kind of a person, but he made some really good and interesting arguments. So I just wanted even Kali and Mahadin to have a listen to it. So without any further ado, I think we should start, Mahadin. What do you say? Unless until you have anything to before
No,
we
no, let's
go,
start.
I think
No, no,
before we have yeah,
yeah, let's start.
Bilal is here, and I hope a few others join as well. And as always, I'll always ask our audience to spread the word, like, subscribe, and share. So, with that out of the way, let's add this. So, I'm pretty sure everybody who listens to us knows by now who Abbas is. I think Abbas is one of the Dai of EF Dawa channel. If I remember it correctly, yes, EF Dawa, right? And I think behind him, Mahadan, you remember? I think we reviewed one video of the guy who's behind. His name is uh, Aziz or something, probably.
Yeah, I remember that. I
Yeah,
think
we
he was
did. We
really
did.
bad. He was really bad, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, well, he was really bad, and you'll get to hear him a little bit. So, yeah, you'll get to hear him a bit. And what's the Bilal Pilot is asking what's the topic about? I think we're gonna review this, and then probably if we get a chance, we're gonna open the stream. And if any one of you, as you can see, convince us, save us from hellfire. That's the title I have given. If you want to join, what we can do is, if somebody is really willing to join, they can let us know in the chat, and we can open the stream if some really interesting guy wants to just have a chat, and we can probably just stop the review
Yeah.
and maybe take it up in the next stream or so. So I think that's a
Yeah.
possibility,
So
right?
if you want to come in and have a debate about anything,
Or
you're most
discussion, I would
welcome.
say, even discussion,
Yeah,
right? I mean, just a
discussion.
genuine
Yeah, if you
question
want
you
to
might have.
debate, that's fine as well. Because I don't shy away from debates. I enjoy them. So if you want to debate, then we can do that as well.
Yeah, definitely. Anybody who thinks their worldview is the right one, and they're on the true path, they can come in and then put forth their strongest arguments and all those things, basically. And we're gonna have a civil debate or civil discussion. As you know, this channel is known for that, pretty much, right? All across the globe, all across the universe, I would say. All right. So, all right, let's start to listen to this. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run it at maybe 1.25, Mahadan, I think is good, right?
Yeah, go for it.
Right? I think we fall into problems there.
So then the argument's not deductive, because you're going to make the
Same mind in the mind of God, or what it must, unlike. The problem is, Allah says that He's unlike His creation.
Yeah, sure.
So when we start to then define the mind of God, or what it must be like, or how it must be, or whether we can even say mind, right? I think we fall into problems there.
So then the argument's not deductive, because you're going to make the assumption that the mind of God is exempt from cause and effect, in which case cause and effect, essentially you're saying, is just a feature of material things or things that exist in the universe, not that it's
So my argument is that it is an argument looking at how material things exist in our reality, okay, and then arguing whether that is a possibility with the absence of God, i.e., just a material existence.
Sure.
And I would say, rather than define God, I would say that if that reality seems to not work and it's unreasonable, then by default the God reality makes more sense.
But then you could just take that same. So your argument, basically, if I understand you correctly, is that it only makes sense if God happens to have this feature which allows it to circumvent cause and effect in order to make a free choice, which then He uses to make the universe at a certain point. Is that?
So no. Again, look. This is what I would say. The nature of God, or the mind of God, or how the mind of God works. For me, I don't like to delve into those issues.
Let's leave that aside.
And I'll tell you why. Because we're trying to now understand something that's supernatural. It's outside of philosophy, outside of science. Right? But what I'm saying to you is that you would accept, for like me, that there are these two alternatives, right?
Which are the two?
Material.
I think first up, if I heard him correctly, if I heard Abbas correctly, the point this guy Flash was trying to make here is that he's saying that because of this attribute of cause and effect, basically, he's thinking something different from the cause and effect of the nature, basically. And I think from this guy's perspective, all he's saying, if you think because of cause and effect there has to be a God, you can't circumvent that problem by just having a God, because all the things that you think cause and effect are affecting, or they're also going to be applied to God Himself, basically, right? Unless until you think that free agent has a complete freedom to just have a cause and effect, basically. I thought, and he said, no, we don't deal with that thing. I think you'll have to ultimately deal with that, Madin. I think so, right? Anyway, you want to add something to it, Madin, or shall we move on?
Yeah, I mean, the conversation picks up randomly, really, doesn't it? So I'm not really sure exactly what was spoken of before that. But I mean, the one on the right, agnostic. I think he's going to introduce himself as an agnostic soon. He's trying to say that if you have a principle that circumvents cause and effect relations, and that can only be found in a God, then there'll have to be some sort of feature about the God that allows him to circumvent cause and effect relations, etc. So if everything requires a cause and effect, then why does that not apply to God? Something like that. Then you may say God has free will, and free will circumvents cause and effect, or something like that. And he was just asking a question to clarify, and the man on the left, Abbas, responds as though we're talking about natural stuff and supernatural stuff is not subject to philosophy. Immaterial things are not subject to philosophy or science, anything like that. And that's the first thing that I want to say is that that's not very clear at all whether that's the case. Whether or not, first of all, philosophy, if you can't do philosophical analysis on God, then the conversation is moot at that point, in the sense that we've got nothing there to establish. Of course, philosophical analysis affects or applies to God. Otherwise, why do we have this entire rich, deep, thoughtful philosophical investigations that have been happening since the beginning of time, designing and trying to come with this God hypothesis that will be free from certain objections, right? For example, if the contingency argument tries to get to a conclusion of a necessary existence that is free from the defects of other models, for example.
Yeah, most of the theists, Mahadan, rely heavily upon these philosophical arguments to make up their case for a a theistic case or a case for a god, pretty much, right? So
Yes.
they can't shy away from saying that no, we don't deal into those things, because if you remove scientific investigation and philosophical arguments, scientific arguments and philosophical arguments, then you are left with nothing, pretty much. Then probably your only epistemology is based in probably testimony, maybe, one of your highest form of
Yeah, I don't. So I don't know what it means to say, without science and philosophy, and then also I don't know what it means to say then you're left with testimony, because you can say testimony. It depends on your philosophical understanding of testimony, right?
Right. True that.
Is it first of all, is it something that is testimony like part of your observational method, right? Is testimony
Right.
ultimately understood through empirical evidence, or is testimony some sort of formed through some sort of logical argumentation? And why? I mean, you can't. In other words, philosophy. Some sort of philosophical.
Your point is really profound, by the way. Your point is really profound, because people think testimony as just devoid of any. I mean, it's in vacuum. It's a thing of in itself, which it is not, basically.
That is, if you look at if you look at the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, there is a point of view where testimony is in and of itself something that is separate from science or something like that. But my point is, let's say that is the case. How do you arrive at that conclusion? Through philosophical sort of justification, right? And what that means is some sort of philosophy is unavoidable, because in order to justify, explain, or get to the point of, you need to engage in philosophy in order to understand the place of testimony.
Even for testimony, you will have to at least logically argument, at least present a few logical arguments in terms of whether the testimony that's coming from someone is reliable or not. So that's at least some form of logic is required to assess the call the weight of its truthfulness, pretty much, right?
I mean,
Madan,
exactly.
your voice is,
When you look down, when you look deeper into what testimony is, it's best explained through empirical evidence.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead. No, I'm just listening to you.
What happened? Did I time travel?
No, I think your voice is lagging. It seems like your internet is starting to trouble us.
Is it? Right. I'm on my mobile data, but okay. You shouldn't have done that.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Now there was a delay for a bit, basically, and then that's why just everything got tangled. But okay, let's get back on it.
But what I was saying is that if you look deep, I don't want to talk about testimony is a bit of a tangent here, because none of these two mention anything about it. But just to quickly comment, when you look at it, the best, I think, the explanation to explain testimony is that it's through induction, through science. It's a hypothesis, for example.
Exactly.
Right? It's a hypothesis in the sense that it's a model of the world. First of all, we learn about testimony through the observational method. And the reason we think certain forms of testimony is reliable is through repeat observations and correlations between certain types of agents or people in certain types of background circumstances that connects it with the truth or producing the truth. Let's say, for example, people who have certain academic qualifications or purport to have particular academic qualifications has correlation when they testify. There's a correlation between that and their testimony being true,
exactly.
So it's based on reputation, reliability, repeat instances of the same thing happening correctly. So you end up with a hypothesis that So end up with a hypothesis, for example, that when I go outside and I see a person walking down the road, and if he tells me, for example, he just came back from the shop, that's a generally reliable testimony in the sense that, I don't necessarily encounter too many people lying about those things, right? and maybe you put it through a Bayesian kind of method, a probabilistic framework, right? That the chances that he's telling the truth is X percentage, the chances of not telling the truth is Y percentage, right? And then you rely upon it to that extent, and you hedge our bets, right? That seems to be based on experience, and we will adjust the probabilities based on the more we know about the person, the more we know about his background, the more if there's discrepancies in his account, etc. Testimony therefore
an
seems
easier example could be a doctor. Basically, doctor's testimony is whenever you go and have a diagnosis, you pretty much more often than not you would trust it, basically. And it's a testimony. It's probably a direct testimony, but it's still in a form of kind of, it's coming from an authority, basically, right? So because of his knowledge, and repeatedly you go to doctors and they are them being right about your diagnosis gives you the confidence in whenever you go to a doctor again for some illness, them being true has a higher probability than if you go to some, say, tarot card reader or something like that, right? So that's the kind of a testimony. And probably testimony is more considered to be, and I gave you an off example because it's not something you're talking about historical testimony versus this kind of a more scientific doctoral testimony kind of a thing. But it's almost a similar concept, just that historical testimony, you are far removed from the person you are hearing from testimony. I mean, not from the person, but at least from the incident that they are talking about, right? So yeah, that's the difference, but the general principle remains the same, basically, right? You get the data from them because of their repeated truthfulness, basically, or their views coming true more often than not, pretty much.
Can you hear me?
So yeah, I think. All right, shall we move ahead?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
My internet dropped out for about a few seconds. I don't know if you realized.
I didn't.
So I clearly I'm having internet issues. So I'm just trying to preempt things now. If I do end up getting off, I'm not sure how you want to manage the stream.
Yeah, no worries. But
what you could do, if indeed.
You dropped off again, Madan, I think. All right, let's move on. I think Madan is having some serious trouble with the internet today. Madan, I'm assuming that you already did your testimony part. All right, I think. Madan, can you hear us? What you might want to do is just to leave the stream and join back again and see if that helps you resolve the problem. So it seems like Madan is having some serious troubles with his internet. So what I'm going to do is, I don't want to do this review by myself because this is a good one and I think both of us should do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the stream and let's see if anybody else wants to join. Okay, Madan, can you hear? Can you hear me? I can't hear you at all. Madan, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
So what I'm going to do is, Madan, can you hear me?
I can hear you now, but I think I'm having a series of problems with the internet, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it's going to be it's going to be really challenging to continue the stream if yeah. What do you think? Shall we continue or shall we just open the stream? I can at least. So what I was saying, can you hear me? Or
I can. Given that we're having these problems, I think if you open the stream and maybe entertain a few guests, and then we call it a night, because if we're having these technical issues, we might not be able to continue properly.
yeah, I think. So, what happened to your internet, home internet?
So I'm on my mobile data. My whole home internet was having problems, but it seems like my mobile data is having problems too. So I think it might be I don't know why both of them are being affected.
Oh, okay. Seems like. So what I'll do is I'll publish I'll open the stream for anyone to join, because it seems like with this, since this is a really good video clip for us, both of
Yeah.
us, to come and review, because I myself, I won't be able to do it because some deep conversations are to be had. So I think Mahaden and I both need at least two of us, either Mahaden, Khali, myself, all three of us should be there. So we'll postpone it until next stream. And in the meanwhile, we'll try it as long as we can. And if there are any callers, they can join and have a discussion. So what I have done is I've made the link public. Anybody who wants to join can come in and join. And in the meanwhile, we can still continue reviewing, as long as Madin's internet is, not going haywire.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So I think ultimately what I wanted to say was, so we don't exactly know what it means to say it's a philosophy free, because every sort of point of view has a philosophy. So in that sense, it doesn't make sense. And if you may want to say, I know there's a popular conclusion to say that the supernatural is not subject to science. And again, he's not defined what he means by the supernatural, and doesn't necessarily doesn't explain what he means by natural, right? But when you define, depending on how you define the supernatural, it may or may not be outside of the reach of. There's plenty of things that are natural which are outside of the reach of observations or testing, etc. I mean, suppose there's a planet that we just can't reach, right? Well, that would be outside of the scope of current science or scientific investigation, and it doesn't make any predictions. We can't really infer what it's like. If there is a planet like that, it will be subject to the laws of physics, but it's outside of our kind of technological observational reach. But it would still be a natural thing, still be a material thing, still be a physical thing. So clearly, there can be physical things which are outside of scientific experimentation, if you want to call it, right? And I'm pretty sure there's plenty of things within science, within physics, that are beyond the scope of current science. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's not physical. So it's not the case that science is only connected to the physical, right? And in a similar sense, then, what we mean by the supernatural, it depends. Is there an ontological difference, or is there an epistemological difference? Some people may say the supernatural is merely just that which is not discovered, in which case quantum mechanics, the multiple galaxies that we've not seen so far, the multiple galaxies that we've discovered in the last 100 years used to be part of the supernatural and then became part of the natural, right? That's not necessarily the most best definition.
I think that's why. Yeah, one of the problems that these guys have, their definitions are really narrow, basically. And in this case, their definition of natural versus supernatural is really shaky, basically, right? And they think, science doesn't really clarify exactly what is natural. Basically, whatever we have discovered so far falls under, if it falls under investigation, then it is natural, pretty much. I mean, anything that you can measure, observe, predict, and testify or verify is basically natural, right? I mean, even something that you can say. I mean, for example, within a radioactive element, when a particular atom is gonna decay, you don't know that, but that particular thing that we don't know about it doesn't add that to a supernatural realm. It's still a natural realm. And similarly, I mean, our natural spectrum kind of things, or whatever you call it, the spectrum of natural things falls under the space-time manifold. We don't know anything beyond that. There could be a manifold of, quantum fluctuations, quantum fields, or any type of different types of wave functions, and whatever, right? If we can get to understand that or get to know that, that's still going to be falling under natural things, even though we cannot understand what it is. Basically, we are just not going to go ahead and say, oh, that's because we don't understand, it's supernatural, right? And so this is the problem they have in their minds. Anything beyond, I think probably maybe Abbas defines it. I mean, maybe they should define it this way, that anything that is aside from God is probably natural, right?
That's one way to do. That's one way to do it, because if
Yeah,
we go by
or
the
God, or God's
minds,
cohorts. Yeah, yeah,
irreducible minds. So that's kind
irreducible
of
minds.
that's a finer distinction to make, and a more intelligible distinction, right?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
otherwise the definition of supernatural, that definition of natural is unfalsifiable, and therefore the
Yeah.
naturalist wins by default by saying he's a naturalist. But in that same sense, everyone's a naturalist, even the theist,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So that'll be an unfalsifiable sort of. I don't think our intuitions, when we try to think about the, we need a better, more clear definition of what supernatural versus natural is. And many philosophers have eventually developed kind of, and we've talked about it before in the physicalist stream, the
Right. Right.
Papanoa stream that we did, David
Yeah.
Papanoa,
Papanoa, right.
etc.
David Papanoa.
And
What's
even
his name?
Paul
David.
Draper, the philosopher Paul Draper, etc. They've come forward with more, and even non-philosophers like Richard Carrier, who kind of follows in the footsteps of Draper. They've put forward a lot more intelligible definition of what we mean by the supernatural. It's not merely things that we've not discovered. It's not merely non-physical things per se, right? And what do we mean by non-physical? Because the definition of physical includes atoms, particles, but also waves now, right? So what do we mean then by a supernatural thing? And a good way of coming to it is a more narrowly tailored definition of the supernatural versus natural, which is that natural things are things that are reducible to physical states, or reducible to non-mental states, and supernatural things are irreducibly mental, right? So when we think about Casper the Friendly Ghost, or we think about some sort of ghoul or apparition, or a god, a spirit, we think that those are supernatural, and they're irreducibly mental phenomena. Instead, there are minds, they're mind states that can have effects and stuff and so on. They do things. Do they have a mechanism? In some sense, they do have a mechanism, but it's not reducible to another thing. On the other hand, a physical difference between a physical mind and a non-physical mind would be that the physical mind is reducible to its parts, components, atoms, tissues, cells,
Quarks, leptons. Whatever you may have.
The nervous system. Whereas, that's a reducible mind. And a non-reducible mind is the supernatural, because they're not subject to any of those processes. They just exist in and of themselves without reduction. And that seems to be that seems like a nicer definition. It's less confusing that way. And if we're in charge of the definitions, so ultimately it's something that we've kind of neatly found, clarified. But it also conforms to our intuitions about what we mean by these things a little bit, and it's a helpful differentiation. And now, if you think about it that way. Now, what the supernatural is an irreducible mind. Is that beyond philosophy? Of course not, right? Would it be beyond the laws of contradiction or analytical thinking? Can we see, of course, it's subject to analysis. And if it's subject to analysis, then it's not beyond philosophical thinking. So I don't know what he's talking about. Even if Abbas says, for example, God's free will circumvents cause and effect, he's gonna. Why does he think that?
He's gonna have to at least substantiate it, basically.
Yeah,
exactly.
How? So how is it beyond philosophy if your brain can make the assertion that God is beyond cause and effect? If your brain can make the assertion that God is beyond cause and effect, I'm pretty sure you have an argument for it, why this works, and that would require philosophy. Right.
or
Yeah.
or else you lay it down on the plate that it's an axiomatic assumption, and even then probably you still need to at least give a kind of a justification for it, basically, I would say, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you come up with the idea that God just circumvents the laws, the causality, cause and effect, it doesn't apply to him. That's just an assertion. But you build it into the definition, and you say, I don't need to explain how. Well, that gives a free pass to any other sort of counter model. You can just
Exactly.
build solutions into the definitions. Here's the solution for the problem of everything. Oh, really? What is it? What Stephen Hawking comes along, tell me the formula. I don't have a formula. It's just solved. Yeah, it's just by definition is solved. But what are you talking about? Right? Any problem in life, infinite regress. Can you have an infinite regress? Right. Well, it's solved. We built into the definition that there is a feature that allows it to solve the logical problems that we think about when we think about infinite regress, a background set of events. It has a feature in it that we can't measure, understand, comprehend, that enables it to transverse the infinite into the past, and therefore the problem is solved. We can have infinite regress. It seems like it's not a very interesting thing to do. Anybody can do that about anything.
Yeah. All right, Madan, let's move on. Let's see what Abbas has to say. Before we move on with the video clip, by the way, anybody who wishes to join and have a conversation, a cordial conversation regarding whatever the worldview they hold, welcome to join us, and then maybe have a friendly chit chat conversation. At least present some arguments in favor or against whatever worldview we have. All right, and let's move on to the video then.
Existence of everything, or an immaterial one?
Sure. I mean, I think the distinction doesn't make sense, but sure.
But why does it not make sense?
It's subjective. What you call material, immaterial, like whatever exists. Whatever you want to call it, immaterial or material.
No, what I mean is supernatural or material.
It's still subjective. Like you can't really objectively delineate between supernatural and natural. It's just a definition we use.
So natural would be something, by definition, not supernatural, not outside of outside of nature or the processes of nature of how we
talk about what is the definition. We had like a 20-minute review on this part of the definition, and you got to hear the beautiful definition from Abbas himself. Supernatural is anything that is not natural. Okay, now define natural. What is natural? I think, Madan, what we did, the definition the other way is probably much more easier to handle, basically, right?
Yeah. If Abbas wants to say anything that is not natural, he needs to explain what is natural. And if he says everything is natural, every single thing is natural, then then what is the common property? What is the common defining property between every single thing? So this is possibly beyond Abbas's understanding. Maybe he's not thought about it this way, because in the world there's lots of things, right? And one of the common thing that connects them together is that you can say they're subject to the laws of physics or something like that, or you can say that, for example, they're reduced to components, etc. There was a definition of the definition of the natural that was tantamount to to dimensions. They have dimensions, right? This was the Descartes' understanding of the natural. It has a shape, it has dimensions, width, length. It's temporal, it's spatial, etc.
Temporal, it's spatial. Yeah, that's the earlier understanding of them.
Yeah, but then we have electrons, right? Which arguably doesn't have that sort of dimensions. They're negligible in terms of size or whatever. What is an electron? Or so is that therefore not natural? Is it so the definition of natural then expanded to include that. So if we go, so it depends what Abbas means. If he means that it's a non-temporal, non-spatial thing, what he's talking about as the supernatural, then that's at least one differentiating point. But that will therefore include electrons.
Yeah, right? Or fields or something like that, or the quantum realm, right? Quantum fields and stuff like that, right?
Yes. So is he saying God is like that, but also the quantum realm and electrons are also part of the supernatural?
Or part of the supernatural, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
he hasn't clarified the definition. Basically, he needs to be a little bit more explicit in defining what he means by supernatural. I think let's listen to him what he
yeah,
says.
that's right. Yeah.
We understand matter and energy and all of these things, and so there's a supernatural be outside of that. So
We don't have a thing. We don't have a thing that meets that definition of a supernatural. Like,
but I don't think you need to define it.
no, what I mean is, if you define natural as everything that we know materially
Yeah,
exists, energy, matter, blah, blah, blah,
yeah.
and you're saying some other thing besides that.
Yes, something outside of that.
Yeah, it presumes that there's that whatever that thing is, it would just be an
What's your
addition.
name, by the way? Sorry.
So, my name, Flash. You can call me.
Flash.
Yeah,
What, are you religious too? Or
agnostic.
agnostic?
But I like philosophy stuff. So this
Okay, it's interesting. You studied philosophy.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's why I like the argument here.
Okay,
Interesting.
okay.
Yeah. But let's just grant that there's a immaterial and material, whatever that means, right? My argument was just that.
It's one point.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to
No,
discuss.
no.
So even the understanding of how this wording used, there is a separation between natural and supernatural. What are the scientists' understanding of the supernatural? They say it's a violation of the natural law. But what we say is an exception in the nature.
But what I would say is it
So
adds to
now, so
natural
that
law.
distinguished brother eloquently mentioned it. I just want to stress the point.
Okay.
No,
Now I'll give you that.
No, I
So,
agree. Just
yeah.
what I'm trying to
So
say
now
is
this
that
All right. If I remember correctly, Madan, his name is Aziz or something like that. Aziz or something like that. I'm not really sure, but he jumped in and clarified the definition, but he didn't, basically, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, there's a
Aziz-
separation,
It's a,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a violation of the natural order.
violation of
Right.
the natural, right? What do you mean by that, basically, right? Anyway,
Yeah.
let's move on.
is the dominant understanding in the philosophy of science. They categorize it.
yeah, they categorize it, but what I would say
Why
is,
did they categorize it? You know why?
well, I think it's a mistake. But
No.
yeah,
No, you can't say mistake. In order to say something mistake, you need to have the correct answer. I can't just something say, brother, you're wrong, without having a correct answer.
So is there general consensus in the philosophy of
Absolutely,
science?
yes. So why the scientists say Jesus Christ miracle? Do they see it as a miracle? No, they don't see. They don't see. They say something as a myth.
they say it didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
They say it would be a violation
It's a
of
violation of
natural
natural law. This is
law.
how they
Sure,
term it. So the terming is very important. Why? Because we can categorize any item. If you don't categorize item, you
No,
can mix together.
I understand
And
it's
that's why,
useful.
brother,
Yeah, I agree. That you could,
eloquently
that's
mentioned.
what I meant when I said subjective, the differentiation. Because the natural laws keep changing, blah, blah, blah. So maybe one day we discover.
No, there are certain things doesn't exist in the reality all the time. When we see the natural process of born human being, we always accustomed with mother and the father and the baby comes. But when someone come from without father, you can't call this is natural. This is where we distinguish between
So,
the.
I don't want to get bogged down in
No,
definition.
it's important
Let's-
because
yeah.
we're talking about the creation. I'll tell you why it's very important. There are few possibilities have creator must have. And there are three main criteria a attribute must have. The creator have the will, ability, and the knowledge. Without these things, any conscious agent who brings everything into existence, that brain have to have these three things. Even if you make anything, you must have these three things.
Hello.
So when we look at, let's say you make a cake. Let's say you make a
Hello.
cake.
Yeah. This Aziz guys have just ruined the conversation. What the heck is he talking about? Like, what
Yeah,
is he?
he's just jumped in and he's just ruined the conversation.
Yeah, he's
What are
gone
these three
all the
properties?
miles further.
Why must he or whoever that conscious agent have these three properties to bring something into existence? He hasn't, as you said earlier as well, he hasn't justified why he's taken these three properties to be absolutely necessary to have a creation. You see, that's the problem. I mean, you need to justify your whatever claims you are making, right? So he hasn't done that part, right? And
No, he just kind of came in and he just took the conversation to multiple tangents. Now he's talking about something completely entirely different, right? And
Yeah,
I don't really understand what he's saying either. And I think he should just talk less.
yeah, that last part about the three qualities was a absolute random tangent, basically.
Yeah, he should. I think this guy should talk less because he doesn't know how to stick to a topic and he doesn't know what he's saying and he's just making things up. Yeah, I think he said something like scientists define supernatural as a violation of the natural order or something like that. Well, scientists aren't in the business of scoping out these categories. Really, that's more of a question of the philosophy of science. As to what these things are. What is nature? I mean, if you're a good scientist, you may be also a good philosopher. But I'm not sure scientists are in the business of being the experts to figure that out, what these things mean, right? But I mean, the idea that the supernatural is a violation of the natural order is begging the question in some sense. How do we, well, that's not the right way. Let me retract a little bit. Can you hear me, by the way? Am I still online?
Yeah, I can hear you. I
Yeah.
just wanted to make a smaller, quicker point that what we said earlier, like 5 minutes back or so, that, science is ever changing. And so defining supernatural using natural is going to be always problematic. And that's what exactly the same thing that this guy also mentioned, probably just maybe 30, 40 seconds back or so, right? That because, natural things are always, our understanding of natural keeps expanding. So defining that is going to be really hard, right? Anyway, carry on.
Yeah. A violation of nature. So he says a violation of nature is the supernatural. Now, not all violations of nature necessarily has to be.
Yeah, I think, and their example was really weird as well, right? Okay, because we see that everybody has a mother and father, and since Jesus didn't have a father, that's why that's a violation of the natural law, basically, right? And maybe in some sense you can say that, but I think you need to demonstrate that it's coming in from a supernatural cause, basically, right? I mean,
yes, that's correct. That's correct. I mean, because for example, everywhere we are, we're subject to the laws of gravity. But when we move away, to a different planet, we're still subject to gravity, obviously, but differently, right? Because
exactly.
So is that a violation of the natural order? Well, I'm not sure. I mean, there would have been a point where every single day, for example, there was the sun coming up, etc., and then one day it was very cloudy and the sun, was covered up, or something like that. There's lots of clouds. Maybe that's not the best example. Or think about light years, or think about meteoroids, or anything that is an exception to the norm. An exception. I'll give you a better example that David Hume gives. Right, water is usually at a particular state, but then it freezes under certain conditions, right? And then you have snow, right? So the nomadic man at some point would have thought this is a violation of the regular state of water, right? This is a violation of something that we of a repeated pattern. This is a discrepancy or anomaly to that pattern, and therefore is this so would you think that's a supernatural instance? No, you wouldn't, right? So mere violations, mere aberrations, mere departures from the norm is not, it's within the grasp of science entirely. Certain things happen repeatedly, but sometimes there are exceptions, right? There's plenty of things that work differently in different layers of reality, etc. It's not beyond science, and we still call it natural. So a mere violation wouldn't be a instance of the supernatural. Henceforth, what I forwarded, I think what people like Richard Carrier, Paul Draper, and other philosophers, and even Graham Oppy now, forwards and advances as a good definition of the supernatural, which is an irreducible mental phenomena that is not reducible to components and parts. It's a better.
I think that's much better definition. That's a much better definition, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, sorry, you wanted to add something to that on top of that?
Yeah, no. I would just say if a mother and if a mother gives birth without a father or something, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the supernatural. It could just be a new scientific finding, just like snow was discovered, or fire was discovered, right? It's just exactly. It could be that X amount of human beings can give birth. It might be part of, I don't know. There could be a scientific, mechanistic, physical theory to explain it. That's why it's
beyond
better
our understanding, kind of a thing that we haven't yet discovered, probably.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of things we don't know how. What have we solved the protein folding problem? Have we solved quantum mechanics? Of course not. How many is there? How many odds? How many stars are there? Is there an odd or even number of stars? That's not solved either. There's plenty of things in science that is not solved. They won't straight away become the supernatural. If there's plenty of new things that we discover all the time. That changes our previous understandings of science. That wouldn't suddenly become the supernatural. So it's not just a violation of nature, whatever that means, Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think Bilal has a comment for us. You're gonna have to review this video in 10 lives. Oh, and that's the nature of beast, Bilal, because in the two Einsteins in the video clip on your left, they are gonna throw such claims that we are gonna have to review all those, and it's gonna be an injustice if we skip those parts. So, but you get the point. Sorry, Martin, you highlighted that part already. Sorry, go ahead. Okay.
This
Between, what would
part.
you recommend to somebody
Yeah.
who wants
So
to investigate
Bilal, what I
philosophy?
would I would pick up a book on introductory philosophy by A.C. Grayling. A.C. Grayling, you'll see that he's written quite a few books. Any one of his introduction to philosophy 101, first year undergraduate course in an English or European, mainly English speaking, university. That would be a very good place to start to learn about epistemology and stuff like that. There's a book that is actually called, I think, Epistemology. That's pretty good. I would also, if you want to learn about ethics, pick up something by Julia Driver called Ethics, or Peter Singer called Practical Ethics, and those are good introductions to morality, etc. Any Oxford handbook is very good as well. Oxford handbook, they tend to be quite expensive, but you can find and download these texts if you look around, etc. For example, Oxford handbook of metaphysics, Oxford handbook of philosophy of mind, Oxford handbook on free will. They zone in onto typical topical issues, and they're sometimes more broader than that. Oxford handbook on ethics, let's say, or naturalism, and you'll get a really good understanding from those as well. So I'd recommend them. If you want really baby steps in philosophy, I would recommend Stephen Law's any of the books for children, even that Stephen Law writes. He writes lots of books for children on philosophy, and how to think like a philosopher, and I think that's very good as well.
How about the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy? Is that a little too?
That's good as
It's
well.
not
But I
for a
think
beginner. It's not for a beginner level, right?
I think no, it's not for a beginner. I mean, some beginners can grasp bits and bobs of it, but it does go into a lot of depth, and it can be quite arcane and jargon. There's a lot of jargon involved. But I think these books that I'm talking about, they're far more well developed to teach you about philosophy in a way that is an encyclopedia is more just a knowledge base. Whereas
and you're gonna find a lot of references to journal papers and all those, like really in-depth kind of philosophy.
yes,
So maybe they might still have, you might probably be able to read a few first few paragraphs, but then after that probably it's just gonna dive deep into it's not organized in that way, that encyclopedia, but you might encounter really challenging phrases and paragraphs in that anywhere probably. So it's up to you,
yeah,
but
that's
you
correct.
can you can take a gander at that as well. Maybe if you feel comfortable that you can understand through it, and then probably that's a really good compendium of all the ideas, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, you can go through the list of topics and just search for philosophy. There's also Philosophy Tube and philosopher. There's lots of channels on the internet on YouTube. I think it's called Philosophy Tube. There's a few others as well. Philosophy for
Yeah, there is
Beginners,
a
etc.
philosophy vibe you can hear. You
Yeah,
can
and
hear
they'll help you. Yeah,
yeah. There is Philo Notes as well, and she explains it in very simple language as well. What else? I think these two are probably the easiest ones, I think, on YouTube. Philo Notes and Philosophy Vibe, basically.
yeah. So those can help as lectures. Also, I would also look at Michael Sandel's lectures at Harvard. On the justice, I think it's called Justice. He did a 10 or 20 video free lecture that's publicly accessible. It's probably I think about more than 10 years old now, but it's very good as an introduction to justice and morality, etc. Michael Sandel. So if you're interested in philosophy of ethics and practical ethics, etc., and questions of justice, that's a very good lecture.
Yeah, great. Listen Truth has written a comment. Religions are without proofing are hellfire for mankind while alive and hereafter. No religions, no hellfire in life and hereafter. Yes, I think, but we still, I mean, you still need to back it up with your arguments. I mean, I think the kind of problems, and Madin, Kali, and myself, all the members of this channel keep, making this point, that whichever side you take, whether you become an atheist, you're an agnostic, or you're a theist, you should have at least delved into some of these challenging questions, arguments, basically, and then see that whether they really fall into the court or the side of the court that you are in, basically. And then you should be comfortable using those arguments and at least responding to them. So, yeah, I mean, partly it is true, but then somebody might, question you on it and say that your argument is an argument from emotion mostly, and then so that is that. Kylie's comment. You can start with philosopher at the end of the universe. I think, yeah, Kylie has mentioned this book quite a few times. One of the books that he picked up long time back, which opened up his mind. All right, Kylie. Yeah, that was my first book on philosophy, right? Exactly. I think. All right, let's then go back to Madin. Unless you want to add something more to what we have already spoken. Otherwise, let's run the video.
Let's run it. Let's run it. Yeah.
We saw a prepared cake. Do you believe that cake, the one who made it, he must have the knowledge of making the cake? It's essential. We don't need a revelation of knowledge.
There's a lot of things.
No. I'm narrowing down to 3 things. Do you say these 3 things must have to have essentially? Okay.
If you say creator, you're implying an agent.
I'm using a cake example.
I know, but you're implying. You say creator, you're implying an agent has a brain that can make a choice.
Let's forget about
something could cause another thing, but not be.
We wouldn't sort of put it in that way as a brain or.
Yeah.
So when we say a mind,
sure, yeah.
Because then it's not a physical thing. It's more of
I meant the same.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
I'm not just. Sorry, I'm not trying to be pedantic.
For example, if I say this bottle, can this bottle make a fantastic bowl of biryani? Now that bottle cannot make a biryani.
I wish it could.
It could, yeah. Then we can have a
business like that.
Yeah, I mean, you're making my mouth water.
Now we need to find out why this bottle cannot make biryani. We need to, and we know that this bottle cannot make it. Yeah? We are reasonable, right? Let's not make it irreal. We know that the bottle is not conscious about what it's going to make. So the conscious is missing, which is mean will is missing. The bottle doesn't have the knowledge to make the biryani, and the bottle does not have the ability to make biryani. So these are essential criteria for any creation.
Qualities.
Exactly. So I'm going to pass it to brother.
No, I think that's a good point. But brother, what I would say is that, look, these are very interesting discussions. But I think that even if we look at the universe, ourselves, our lives holistically, the best explanation is a creator. So one of the things I would say to you is, can a property that doesn't possess a quality, can it give rise to that quality?
Logically possible.
Is it possible?
It's possible.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, water, H2O produces wetness in water, but neither hydrogen nor oxygen has the property of wetness.
But the combination of those things.
Yeah, so that means you're saying you combine things in a certain way, you can produce something which the parts
Yeah,
lack.
yeah. So now H2O does have the properties to give rise to water.
Yeah. If you mix it in a certain way,
Of course.
Yeah.
But can anything that doesn't have the properties
As a single
give
unit,
rise to something? Not even if you mix things together.
So it depends on. So I mean, in a sense, you're going to go in a circle because then if you say a rock lacks the property of creating like biryani, for example, right? Then it's true by definition if you describe the properties of the rock as such. But there could be something which. So yes, in a great essence, I agree. It neither has can't have the potential nor can it have. Sorry, it can't have the property nor can it must not have the potential either to create the thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't have the potential, or doesn't have the properties, then it can't give rise to that thing. Agreed?
Yeah, agreed.
So
Did I see Abbas changing his question, or was that his original question? I think when the guy and when Flash answered that, see, water has that property because neither hydrogen nor oxygen has the property of wetness, but did it seem to me, or was it actually that's what he did?
Let's go back a little bit. Let's see what his original question was again.
Yeah.
Possible.
Possible.
Can you give me an example? Give rise to that. Can a property that doesn't possess a quality, can it give rise to that quality?
Logically possible.
Is it possible?
Yeah.
You know what I think is yeah. Go ahead.
No, it's funny because first of all, that sounds weird. Can a property that doesn't have a property?
Yeah, exactly. I was saying, well, it doesn't even make sense that what
let me
do
make
you
sense of it,
mean a
though.
property can have
Yeah. Yeah, does something that lacks a property ultimately then eventually give rise to that property, or something
So
like that?
the answer that this guy gave was pretty spot on to that question.
Exactly. I would have responded the same. And this is the difference between philosophy students and just this is why you should study philosophy. You come up with good answers, because that's a near perfect answer, because it changed Abbas's script. Then he went, all right, property and potential, right? Because
and potential jumps in from nowhere just because I was defeated in that question. Then that
exactly. So because clearly there's plenty of things that don't have the qualities that eventually, like rubbing a piece of wood with another piece of wood and it causing a fire. Now the wood
basically
contains fire. The other wood doesn't contain fire, but when you rub it, then it eventually creates fire. Does it have the potential? Yeah, it does have the potential. Does it have does it have the actual fire quality, the properties? Of course it doesn't. In combination they have, right? So his original question, and he basically, Abbas has conceded here that it doesn't have the properties, so he just added, all right, but it does have the potential. But we agree that it has the potential. So that wasn't what your original question was. The original question was as an assertion that something that doesn't have a quality or the property already can't bring about another property. Can't bring about that property, and that is wrong. That is flat out wrong. In fact, the history of the universe demonstrates. I just gave one example. The agnostic here gave one example with water. The chemistry is filled
full
with
of all these examples. Full of all these examples.
You couldn't be more wrong. You couldn't be more wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
And one more point, Madan, I noted that they have to come to this, it's almost they have to take this axiomatic take on potential. I mean, this is just an axiomatic take that does it have the potential, basically. Now you have defined something to have that kind of property in terms of their bringing about a creator kind of thing. Basically what they want is that only creator can have that property to create, and nothing else can have that intrinsic property, in a sense. So that's what he's trying to do here when he says
quality. Can it give rise to that quality?
Let's move forward.
Yeah, so that means you're saying you combine things in a certain way, you can produce something which the parts lack.
So now H2O does have the properties to give rise to water.
Yeah. If you mix in a certain way,
of course.
Yeah.
But can anything that doesn't have the properties
as a single
give rise to something? No, even if you mix things together.
So it depends on. So I mean, in a sense, you're going to go.
Exactly. Now it becomes definitional. I mean, you're saying, can you mix two things that can't create water, basically, or wetness in this case, right? Can you have such things? By definition, no, of course.
Yeah.
In a circle, because then
do you want to add something to it, or shall we move on? I think we spoke about it last.
He's using property, potential whenever he wants, however he wants.
I think it's confusing exactly what he means when he's using property, potential. I mean, he didn't even use potential as a word. I don't think he did use it, but it seemed like he wanted to use potential, right?
Yeah. The thing about this, he's going to mull over this point a lot, but there's plenty of the exact examples that I've given, the example that the agnostic has given is already sufficient to defeat the point. That things look like, but things can have the lack of those properties, but in arrangement, in amalgamation, it emerges.
Can give rise to newer properties.
Yeah,
basically.
It's called emergentism. Emergence is a real thing. Right? Emergence is that individually things don't have those properties, but collectively they have properties. Yeah, you could say they have the potential individually. That's a different thing, and we're defining potential different to property. But if by property we mean the exact thing that we're talking about, like fire and or wetness of water, or wateriness of water, with all its properties of water, the melting point, boiling point, etc. No, it doesn't. It doesn't exist. A single molecule of water probably doesn't have it, but a collection of molecules of water has those properties of waterness, right? A single molecule of water has the potential, which is a potential is merely just a idea in our heads, really, right? In the sense that it has the potential in the right circumstances, but it doesn't have the properties, right? But the point that Abbas is trying to make is that, I think he's going to try to make, is that the universe, God is the only way of explaining how the universe can come, because it's the only way to explain how the properties of the universe can come, or something like that, because he already possesses the properties or something like that, right? But he's already given examples of things that lack properties that emerges later, which means that which means that if he comes to a situation where he shows that these things lack these properties, it can't lead to that property later on, because they don't have it in them in and of it themselves, right? That's wrong, because water in and of a single molecule of water, or hydrogen and oxygen on its own, doesn't have the properties of water in and of themselves, but together they do. So that counters any sort of a situation that he's going to give now, because it shows that what may look like that this is something that cannot give rise to the other thing, because they must possess the quality, the property right there in and of itself. You know what is wrong, because it might look like that, but in reality, when it's together, it can emerge that new property, and therefore the entire principle is false. Yes, we can find things with lack the qualities, lack the properties, but eventually give rise to them. That's it. That's the end of that. He should just revise his point.
I mean, it's such a simple point that I don't know how. I mean, it's not just Abbas, probably. I think others in his camp believe the same as well, that he does, basically. But it's such a simple thing, and for them, I think probably have they taken it from William Lane Craig? Does he espouse similar views to Abbas? That I don't think so. Maybe he's not as nuanced as.
Though I don't think it's correct.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on. Right.
If you say a rock lacks the property of creating, like biryani, for example, right? Then it's true by definition if you describe the properties of the rock as such. But there could be something.
Yeah,
which,
I mean, I don't.
So
think
yes, and in a great essence, I agree. It either has can have the potential, nor can it have. Sorry, it can't have the property, nor can it have.
Yeah, Madan. Sorry. Did you say anything, Madan, or was there some problem in the? Anyway, let's continue.
It must not have the potential either to create the thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't have the potential, or doesn't have the properties, then it can't give rise to that thing. Agreed?
Yeah, agreed.
So then you have to explain to me consciousness.
Absolutely. Explain to consciousness.
Where did it come from?
But now we're talking about the brain. Let's assume my position. I'm a materialist, so I'll take the brain produces consciousness. But
you made an assumption there.
No, I agree to some extent. That's my thesis. I'm starting with.
Yeah.
I won't be able to explain how consciousness.
Of course,
about,
that's why it's called the hard problem.
Exactly. Make a price for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
maybe this conversation will become more viral than any other. Yeah, absolutely.
But however, as we talk.
I mean, what I would say is here, I mean, how sneaky that argument is from Abbas, basically. See, he says, he assumes that consciousness does not, whatever the consciousness arises from, doesn't have that potential to give rise to consciousness. And he hasn't given, that's a claim, that's a big claim. And what he needs to do is to provide us or substantiate his claim. He hasn't done so far. So I'm not quite sure why Flash hasn't caught that immediately, basically. And he should have asked him, why do you say that simple brain states, maybe he does say that simple neural states give rise to consciousness, basically, or arrangement of synapses basically gives rise to consciousness, or an interplay of neurons between those synapses gives rise to consciousness, basically. And you can at least substantiate by way of giving references to a couple of studies where the brain is injured and then people lose consciousness, basically, right? At least to some extent. And in some cases, people go into coma and just lose consciousness completely altogether. So this is a pretty good indicator of saying that, okay, we don't understand how exactly it functions, the consciousness, or how it arises, but we have a sufficient data or good enough data to point that certain neural states in the brain and their interplay between the neurons and the synapses can give rise to consciousness, basically, and there is sufficient data to support it, basically, right? We don't know the how, but we can at least say that it's more probabilistically what do you say, approvable model, basically, right? Rather than the consciousness coming from some supernatural agent. At least that's what my take is. I don't know whether Madan agrees with my point here or not. Madan, can you hear me? Do you want to add anything to it?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, obviously, Abbas set up with the idea that if something doesn't have the properties or qualities in its basic state, then in its emergent state, it won't arise either. And obviously, that was falsified because he's the agnostic, and so as we did as well, provided multiple counterexamples. In fact, the history of science has full of examples of emergence where basic and simpler or in its component states, the thing lacked certain qualities and properties, but eventually when you put it together, in fact, the whole of chemistry is about that, right? The whole of chemistry.
Exactly, whole of chemistry.
Sodium and chloride lacks qualities of salt, but sodium and chloride,
saltiness, right?
Yeah, exactly. But sodium and chloride bonded together into this kind of lattice structure produces this salt thing that we call salt, and it has all the properties with soft salt. But sodium atom doesn't have isn't salt. You know, a chloride atom isn't salt, and it doesn't have the salt qualities. The history of entire physics is full of these examples. I can sit here all day and I won't finish giving examples.
Yeah, Madan, what I'm trying to do over here is, let's grant him that. I think I'm questioning his assumption that why is he taking that axiomatic take on these properties, basically, and on what basis? We have given him plenty of examples, and there are millions and millions of such examples, right? And billions probably, if not trillions probably. The problem is when he says that these properties cannot arise, especially in terms of God, that he's saying, he needs to substantiate this now, right? For the sake of argument, we can move ahead with his thing, right? But at least he needs to substantiate why he's assuming that thing here. At least that's my objection to his take on it.
His point, his original point about the qualities won't emerge from lower states or component states, etc. When it gets to a more complex, emergent, larger state, the thing in and of itself from the beginning should possess those qualities, because that's false. Any further conversation on this doesn't make a lot of sense, because he wants to apply now that to the brain, and he wants to say, which is akin to the hard problem of consciousness. How does thoughts, feelings, ideas, and what seems like non-material things, right, immeasurable things that are not necessarily graspable. For example, you can't put a thought under a microscope. You can't measure the dimensions of a thought. You can't weigh a thought. It doesn't have any mass. It has no. It doesn't conduct electricity, right? A thought, seemingly anyway, it seems like it, right? You can't grasp. It's not a tangible entity. A thought is a thought, right? And he wants to say, if the mind is the brain, or the mind is a product of the brain, or is associated with the brain, how does the mind come from the brain? And he wants to say that, for example, for the original principle that he talked about, which is the thing must inherently contain those qualities. The brain, or brains, for example, the physical matter of the brain, the neurocircuitry of the brain, the hemispheres of the brain, the neuroplasts, neurons, atoms, these don't contain the qualities of the mind, which is the properties of the mind, which are again feelings, thoughts, emotions, anger, rage. Rage cannot be found in those molecules, those molecular states. Rage cannot be found on those atomic states. It cannot be found at all even in the neuroplasts. Where is the rage? There's no rage there.
It's just a neuroplast can be measured, and it has all these other qualities, these physical qualities. But the mind is these non-physical things. So we can't get that. But he's already conceded that there's plenty of situations where the thing in and of itself doesn't have it, but in emergence it comes, right? We can't therefore a priori rule out that just by examining the micro state, that the macro state can't have certain qualities. There's always the macro state always contains radically different qualities that we've just never seen before, right? From the micro state, right? That we could not have predicted from the microstate until and unless we fused that sodium and chloride atom together, until and unless we fused these chemical ingredients together, right? Because from in and of themselves, we can't assume it can't do X, Y, Z. Therefore, why is he a priori assuming neuroplasts or atoms arranged into this brain can't give rise to these feelings, these thoughts, etc.? Entirety of science disproves that the thing that he's trying to say. So yeah.
I mean, I agree. I think we already kind of found a problem in this argument basically by giving such examples. But I'm saying, for the sake of argument, let's move on with his argument. And then, how did he assume that atoms and these molecules and all these quarks, leptons, whatever the fundamental unit you want to go to, don't have these properties of consciousness, right? Basically, I mean, it's maybe my arguments seems really absurd to everybody, pretty much, right? I'm saying, since you have made this claim, you need to provide, because just saying that, it's so obvious, I think that's not an argument. It's just your claim, basically. Again, my argument is, you made a claim, provide us the evidence. You made a huge claim that these things do not possess the property of consciousness. Maybe for some reason, a quark or a lepton is conscious. To what level? We don't understand. It has that property or potential quality of consciousness, which when combined together with millions and billions of leptons or quarks or whatever you may have, gives rise to a very different lattice structure, gives rise to that consciousness, basically. So that's the point I'm saying. And he's trying to say that they don't possess. So give me an evidence, basically. That's what I'm saying, kind of, right? So anyways, Madan, you wanted to add something to it.
So let's just clarify some words there. I mean, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. I think you can't hear us, Madan.
Okay. So I think there's a lag. There's a lag happening.
Yes, there is a lag.
Do you think there's a lag?
Yes.
Or I'm just gonna wait about 10-20 seconds before I speak.
Yeah, I think you. Can you hear me, Madan?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that lag lasts only like a couple of seconds.
Can you hear me?
So you're good. You're good now.
Okay. I mean, So the idea that let's just clarify a few things, just so that we can follow the conversation even with each other. When I say property or when I say quality, I mean the actual effect, right? Has to be there in the micro state. The micro state. So when I say macro state or
Madan, your voice is breaking again.
I mean,
so
post-emergence reality. So a macro state. Can you hear me?
Your voice is breaking. So I would say come back again in the stream. Right, it's breaking really. And I think Jimmy had joined. Jimmy, you joined the stream. I saw you in the backstage. If you want, come back again, and maybe we'll take you in the stream. Madan, maybe you need to leave the studio and come back again, or maybe reset your internet or something like that. Check how much data you're left with or something like that, because there is a lag and then your voice seems to be breaking at times. Can you hear me? All right, I think Madan is having some issues here. So what I'll do is I have already made the link public. Anybody who wants to join. I saw Jimmy join the stream. So Jimmy, if you're still in the listening to the stream, or you might want to join back again, and I'll take you in, and we can have a conversation if you want. Okay, let's listen. Yeah, I think this was Bilal asked for a few books and philosophy stuff to read, and I think we gave him plenty of stuff to go through. And what I'm gonna do is, since Mahadan is having huge trouble, maybe I think we've covered probably about 10 minutes into the conversation. What we're gonna do is, next time we are gonna... Mahadan is back. Okay. Madan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
All right. Yeah, I can hear you now. I think at the time it was probably a huge lag, and then your voice was a little choppy.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say then, for the same reasons we know that combining water molecules produces watery properties, right?
I agree. I see your point. Yeah, I see your point.
That water molecules lack. Water molecules lack those properties, but combining them leads to an emergence property, an emergent property, emergent thing called water, that we call water, and has watery
Wetness,
properties.
yeah, or you can say wetness, probably.
Wetness,
right.
Boiling point, melting point, shine, or whatever you want to call it. The water,
Right.
all the things that we think of water. Yeah.
Right.
We could, why do we know that? Why do we know that's the case? Why do we know that's the case? Well, because when you bond those water molecules together, it produces it. That's it. We have no other deeper explanation why, right? We have no other deeper explanation. We don't really, maybe scientists want to think about how
I think, I mean, the point is simple. We don't observe it individually in those atoms, say in hydrogen atoms and oxygen atoms or molecules, and then we combine them in a certain particular ratio, as an H2O, and then you see it, basically you observe it, right? So, and that's a very simple explanation for it.
Another way, exactly. So it's an emergent reality. Now, if that's the reason why we accept it for that, and that's the reason why Abbas accepts that the water molecule has potential for it, then he should also accept the same analogously for the brain and the mind. Because we have no better example why the mind forms as we put together the individual components of the brain. Lots of nerves arranged in that particular arrangement leads to consciousness. Just like lots of water molecules arranged in that particular arrangement leads to water. Right? If Abbas accepts it for water, then he should accept it for the brain, because he has no better reason to accept it for water than he has for the brain. Why does he think water molecules have the potential?
Yeah. Why all of a sudden he's smuggling some supernatural entity into consciousness, basically? That's the question.
Yeah. Why does he accept it for the water, but not accept it for the brain? He just said water molecules have the potential. Why? The reason that we know it has the potential is because of empirical learnings about how water molecules, when they come together, they produce water. For the same reason, the only reason we know that the brain produces consciousness is when brain molecules, when they come together, they produce consciousness.
Unless until he can provide an example of a mind sans brain, basically, or any of the physical material molecules, basically, right? That would be a start, probably.
That would be a start.
Then, yeah.
It would still mean that our brains can be conscious, whilst there's other minds. Sorry, our minds are reducible or identical or the same as the brain, whereas there are other minds that are not. Just like there are other
Right.
things that are wet that are not
Right,
water.
right, exactly,
Right?
True that.
But just because you show a counter example, oh, this is wet, this is not water.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
sure.
he's still stuck with the same problem. I mean, he can, but at least at the same time, then he can say that there are other minds that are not material minds, and you can say those are at least non-material minds, basically, right?
Yeah. But yeah, that's correct. But I think he wants to show that this is the argument from consciousness, that materialism or naturalism can't explain consciousness. And
Yeah,
therefore,
exactly.
yeah,
His purpose is still defeated, basically, in a sense.
exactly, because that's what he wants. I don't see how by him showing there are
Other
non-physical minds that
minds, yeah,
exist.
yeah,
That explains this, because he wants to show there's a problem for naturalism to explain these particular things, right? I mean,
exactly.
if he shows there are non-physical minds, then naturalism has been defeated because there's non-physical minds. But it won't get to God unless you. But if you unless one of those non-physical minds is God, but that defeats the whole purpose of this argument. If you can just wholeheartedly skip the entire thing and just show a non-physical mind, here's a god, right, and it's God, then we don't need any of further argumentation. You've already shown there's a god. But
Right.
yeah,
Okay, I think Mahadin, a few minutes back, a guest caller had joined, named Jimmy. I don't know if you realized he was in the back studio, and before I could even announce that he was in the back studio, or I could take him up on the screen, he left. So anybody who wishes to join and maybe have a chat with us, and since I'm saying this because today Madin's internet is really flaky, so maybe we can keep the conversation or the review short, have a conversation with a guest caller, and call the stream done, basically, and then maybe take up this reviewing this video for some other stream, maybe. Madin, what do you think?
yeah, I think we should just put this on the shelf now, because my internet is a bit shaky. We've tried a few times. I think we covered a nice amount of it, but there's a lot of juice there, and I think this is a good video. The interlocutor here is very well astute, the agnostic. The Islamic interlocutors, on the other hand, are very similar in caliber to the previous ones that we've kind of, but we should leave it for another day. Let's have some
Yeah,
really.
I haven't seen many times Abbas, delving into philosophical arguments. And what I have seen, and Madin, you know that, and everybody in our, at least from our team, knows that I have been to EF Dawa streams maybe once, and I have seen their streams as well, live streams as well, and I have realized whenever there is a very deep philosophical question, or even really deep scientific question on plate, I have seen Dr. Imran, whom I think is much better, at least Dai as compared to Abbas, has tries to shield him basically from those questions. And similar thing happened to when I was on the stream, pretty much. So maybe I have spoken about it on one of our last streams as well, that we can review my conversation on that. And somebody else asked as well, I think. I don't know who asked that, asked us to review that stream. One of our audience member asked us to review that stream, or that conversation rather. I said stream, the conversation that I had on EF Dawa. And most of the questions were handled by Imran. And as soon as Abbas jumped in, Imran realized that the conversation would lead them to some, unwanted waters, basically, or treacherous waters. So then, yeah. So as we can see, Abbas is not familiar with all these arguments, probably. I mean, deeper arguments philosophically, or he's philosophically not all that savvy, I would say. Anyways, so anybody who wants to join, as we have said, I think we are not gonna run the video clip and review it anymore, because Madan's, as we said, Madan's internet is a little bit flaky. We want to review it together because there is still a lot of juice in this video clip for us to review. And so we can have one or two callers, or otherwise we'll call the stream over for now. Let's see, we'll wait for another 5 minutes and take up the comments. All right, Bilal. Maybe I'm boring you, but I was wondering, what would you say to Muslim who said that the top poets at the time of Muhammad marveled at the language of Quran? See, I think one of the problems that I see, Bilal, here is these are all, there is no independent account of all these things coming, right? All that information that one of the top poets of that time of Muhammad marveled at the language of Quran, it's coming from the Islamic literature itself. And mainly, chiefly through the Islamic history, basically, right? So that's a suspect, basically, right? Because why would you take, even if there were, let's say there was those reports that are in there of some poets genuinely praising Quran's language and the use of poetry and prose within it, right? Or the combination thereof. That there could be genuine poets who would have done that, but is it not possible that there were some who criticized it as well, and those accounts were not really included in the history because the history were written by the Muslim scholars themselves, right? That's a possibility, right? I would say. And also, one of the things is, I think I think this there is a lot is made of this thing, because those who wrote the Quran probably were themselves poets coming from the court of the rulers who were the who and who of ruling the Ummah, basically, right? So it is more likely than that those poets who were the well versed with the language were writing the these passages, basically. So yeah, I mean, I don't see. I mean, even the very well known poet Emrul Qais, basically, right? All you hear about him is coming from the history literature itself, and his poetry is supposedly pretty good. But who wrote these poetry? You only hear about Emrul Qais, but are there independent accounts of Emrul Qais, basically, or the poetry of Muallakat, basically? I don't know. I mean, I would love to see if there are independent accounts of, but in my knowledge, all the information is coming from the history, Islamic history, and I doubt that there is any independent history about that. Anyway, Mahadin, would you like to add anything to that point?
Yeah, I mean, you obviously mentioned historical. I mean, part of the historical method is you want independent evidence. You want evidence from a whole host of different arenas in order to ensure that it's reliable. That's how history proceeds, right? You don't want the insight. You don't want just one account. You want multiple competing testimonies, all converging to the same truth, perhaps, where your opponent, your enemy, also testifies to the same, right, etc. And that would increase historical accuracy. And there's a definite sense of doubt about historical independence in terms of this being a genuinely factual account of things. If it's all just from one side, biases kind of affect the understanding, etc. So we don't have a genuinely well corroborated account, therefore, of this apparent. Poets were marveling at the Quran. I mean, were there like Philo said, were there dissenters? Were there who were silenced or excommunicated? And were only the good good parts maintained. Basic historical testimony problem there. But other stuff is like at the time there wasn't really an objective criteria. It was more like a subjective thing. And what does marvel mean? And we know, for example, that there's cognitive biases like the power of suggestion, confirmation bias, and other forms of distortions that are well known throughout psychology. For example, Charles Manson and the Manson family, for example, they worshipped him simply because they were biased through whatever brainwashing. The what's it called? Who's the cult leader in America that recently? Is it the Mormons? Is it the Mormons in the United States? There was a person, I forgot his name now, and he was
Jones.
Say that again.
What's his name? Something Jones? No, Jim Jones, or what's his name?
I can't remember. Well, whatever the case, there's been multiple accounts of any sort of religious demographic that we've seen throughout human history and geographically distributed throughout the world. There is this.
You meant Joseph Smith?
Joseph Smith, that's correct. Joseph Smith, I'm thinking about. And he literally convinced in the modern era, right? And people, they were fanatical about him. And that same sort of devotion and adoration and submissiveness and worship like feelings, how is that any different from the adulation and worship like feelings and marvel that you feel towards the Quran? It's very subjective, right? Until we kind of quantify it and explain it that way. Is my internet going again? I think my internet may be going again. I'm not sure. Am I still there?
No, you're fine. I just removed. You're just fine. I just removed that because now we are not going to review it anymore. So I just removed it.
Yeah. Okay, fine. So what is the criteria? And it's kind of shocking that we don't have a tangible and transparent criteria even since the 7th century. Nothing was visibly present. It's not like obvious. It pretty much took linguists of this century, or maybe even the last 50 years, to kind of figure out a criteria in order to objectify it. People on, not even linguists, I mean non-linguists, people who don't have anywhere near the qualification to be called a linguist, like Hamza Tzortzis coming out with the objective criteria, the linguistic miracle of the Quran. So the fact that it wasn't there from the beginning and people have to dig it out kind of seems a little bit suspect, right? So yeah, there is an issue with who is the judge, and it's just a subjective thing. But then let's say indeed it's a real thing, and it means that, what does it mean? It means that you want to make it an argument that the linguistic style of the Quran is so unsurpassably perfect or great or amazing that a human being could not have produced it. If a human being couldn't produce it, then a non-human must. You still need a few more premises to get to a God. An omnipotent.
God. I mean, you're still way farther from proving your God. All you can do is that somebody whoever wrote this book probably was, really good poet, really, really good. I mean, at that time as well. I mean, there were, I think, whether it's in the Quran or not, there's, it's in the Hadith, it's in the Hadith literature basically, and there were quite a few poets who were supposedly questioning the eloquence of the Quran. Basically, I can name a few. Basically, the most famous one is Nadir ibn al-Haritha, his name, I think, and there was Abu Afaq, there was Asma bint Marwan, quite a few other guys as well. I think there was another prophet who claimed to be a prophet. His name was Musaylima or something like that. And he also claimed to be a prophet, and he said no, the poetry in the Quran is not all that good. So I think this again, all this information is again coming from the history literature, right, from within the sources. So why don't these guys talk about these instances where somebody from within those very Arabic culture claimed this book not to be as eloquent, or so, or claiming that Prophet Muhammad didn't, the poetry was substandard or not, not all that great and stuff like that. So again, as Madan said, it's very subjective opinion, pretty much, right? So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Madan, you want to add something to it? Or
Yeah,
shall we?
in order to counteract these flaws, what people could have done, at least today, is that they could have got multiple independent corroboration of this through now what we have now through academic sciences and linguistics and the arenas of linguistics. We could have got multitude of different linguists from around the world with no connection or no sympathy or empathy towards Islam, who have no affiliation with Islam, who are not willing to become Muslims, or they're not at all known to be Muslims, and you could have got their confirmation in a consensus, not just one or two pick and mix, cherry-picked scholars who seem to say something, and demonstrate actually that a large majority, and that there is a consensus on this, converge to the same opinion that the linguistics, the eloquence of the Quran is inimitable, cannot be produced by another human being. Right? They could have done this, or they could have done it through computer science, for example, or by encoding these, arranging these words together and showing that in fact you can't make another sort of verse like it. In fact,
no, I mean, if that were the case, Maha, then even no AI should even be able to replicate it. Basically, couldn't write anything similar to it. Basically, but we know that AI can.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So through because now we have computers. You could arrange the letters into infinite permutations and arrangements, and eventually come to something that that
will
will
give rise to something at least similar in eloquence to the Quran, pretty much, right? And especially if you consider bring the surah like it, basically, right? And the smallest surah is, I think, Surah Kausar, probably having only three ayah.
Yeah. Right? So what I'm saying,
yeah.
What I'm saying is that we need linguists, for example, to actually confirm that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying, even given that vast amount of this is possible, you can come up with through AI. But again, as your point is really, what do you call the final nail in the coffin of this argument, that you need some really good judge, independent, who can give a proper verdict on it, basically.
Yeah. I mean, we accept, for example, the theory of evolution to be true because we have biologists from all around the world converging to the same opinion, right? It's just a consensus. We don't have a consensus for the Quran, right? What we do
for evolution, probably, and I'm going on a little bit of a tangent. Maybe somebody could claim, oh, this guy from William Dembski from the Discovery Institute, or Michael Behe, they don't believe in evolution and all those things. So they are like the fringes of the fringes, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's people who don't believe in climate science, the consensus of the climate science, the majority.
Yeah, and there are people like flat earthers. So
exactly. So it doesn't really matter. We're talking about consensus, and even within Islam, there are dissenters. For example, there's people who don't. There are minority of scholars who believe in this and that, and for example, but you go with the consensus. The consensus is, at this moment, linguists don't even talk about the Quran. Submit it for review. We have academia now. You have Arabic speakers who are not connected to Islam. Get an unbiased judge or a set of judges and let them establish that in fact they have no friend or foe in this argument necessarily. Don't pick necessarily an Islamophobe or somebody who's highly critical of Islam. There's plenty of people around the world, and you can form a committee, like a scientific assessment of the situation, and try to genuinely establish whether or not, first, this is not something subjective but objective. It's objectively irreproducible. That's it. Objectively, you can't replicate it. Right? I just avoided this altogether. I cannot say irreproducible, fast enough. You cannot replicate it. You cannot replicate it. And it's not just the opinion of Omar this or Bilal that or some other Muslim name or some convert or whatever, or some fringe linguist called Charlie or Patricia who is like the anomaly. You know,
No, but
reality,
yeah,
vast majority of it.
Patricia name rang a bell in my head, and reminded me of one really wonderful
Historian,
Orientalist,
Orientalist,
Patricia Crona.
yeah,
Right.
Patricia Crone. That's why I probably said it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you need that sort of evidence. But here's the thing. Just logically speaking, think about this logically speaking. If the criteria is truly objective and right, then should it not be replaceable? Should you not be able to reuse those same tools to write a new sentence?
Right.
Right? Think about it. the only way not to do it is if it's subjective. Like it's tightly constrained to the or the Quranic language to the point where any alteration of those tools, those linguistic tools, in any other arrangement will be a departure from the Quran. In which case, it's kind of like a subjective one, right? But if it's objective, those linguistic devices are ready to be used in a different arrangement to write a new sentence entirely, then you should be able to write a new sentence. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I think Madan, I think we have talked about this Quranic challenge quite a few times in our English streams as well as Hindi streams, right? Hindi Urdu streams. And the problem is this criteria is so subjective, and within the Quran, you don't find any specific guidelines as to how you can achieve that and bring a surah like it, or bring a for that eloquence test. And there are no mentions of who the judges will be, even though it gives that you won't be able to ever won't be able to do it. So there is a definite kind of a, so if you are a Muslim, that you have to believe that nobody, even though, so even if you put as judges a couple of really great Muslim scholars, they are bound by their faith not to accept any kind of a response on that, because the moment they accept that this is something similar to the eloquence of the Quran in prose and poetry, they are already excommunicated, basically, right? So there lies in the challenge, and anybody could just say that if you bring somebody who's not a Muslim, then they're gonna be biased towards what they believe in, pretty much, right? So it's a test that it falls into all sorts of problems, I think, pretty much, right? Because it's a test that is by definition something weird, basically, because you're not given a particularly clear definition of what the Quran is looking for in terms of eloquence, as to excuse me, sorry, how you would be arranging those proses or poems. Nor the judges are given exactly who are going to judge. Sorry. So yeah. Anyway, you take over. And
yeah, you may want to mute your mic when you do that, because
I'm sorry, I was talking and I couldn't mute myself, basically, and that's why I said
each time you sneeze, an angel dies or something. What is it?
Yeah. That's why they say bless you. Is
it? I think I just made that up. I remember something like that, but is that true?
No, I think in Christian theology there is something like that, and that's not probably, but your soul, not angel dies, but your soul dies, or your soul leaves your body, something like that, right? And that's why this
sneeze your soul out through your nose. Oh.
Anyway, so I think, all right, and couldn't come up with something similar to it. I guess it would be the question of who determines if the text is superior, can be objective. I think there's a point we tried to make in past like 2-3 minutes, 5 minutes of our. Don't need to make a video on this.
No, you can't prove that it's divine without more supplementary arguments. So additional arguments to show that in fact the being that created it if it's not a non, if it's a non-human, that non-human possesses the qualities and characteristics of a god. You don't need omnipotence for it, which is superfluous to explain tremendous linguistic abilities, right? In order to get to infer omnipotence, you need more arguments, right? And similarly, to infer omnibenevolence, omnipresence, you need more arguments. So you can't prove the divine from it, but you could potentially make like a kind of a set of different arguments. For example, you can prove the Kalam cosmological argument, and then you can try and prove the linguistic argument, and try and make a connection between the two things. That in fact a god exists, and here we have a situation where a book purporting to come from this god, which cannot be produced from humans, and then you may make but it purports to come from a god. It cannot be produced by humans, therefore it came by a non-human, and the other non-human that we know, that we've confirmed is through the Kalam cosmological argument, is God, and he seems to say that he created this, and therefore make the inference that therefore the best explanation, like a best explanation argument, the best explanation is that it came from God, right? But that, I would still say, that's a little bit weak. It could very well be that the case that the Kalam cosmological argument is true, but can you still, do you get the divine properties from the Kalam cosmological argument? I don't think you can, even if you establish a mind. But let's say you did. What does that necessarily mean then? A book that was written by purportedly God, that cannot be explained through any other means but a non-human cause, we should link it to the explanation behind Kalam, or the explanation behind the first cause? Not necessarily. There could be it might be a fallacy of the excluded middle. There's a region of space in between that we may not have discovered within the universe that could be responsible, for example, that book, right? Furthermore, if we want to investigate that further, it would be more concordant with for example, the problem of evil, the problem of suffering, for that being not being a godlike being. So the Kalam cosmological argument establishes like a highly powerful being, when you look at all the other data around the world and all the other inconsistencies within the Quran, for example, you may think that the author of the Quran was a different being than the creator of the universe. You see that? So I would challenge the idea that we can just make a quick inference to connecting those two things together, that the Kalam cosmological argument plus the linguistic argument being successful equals justification to believe in the divine. Well, on its own, it might seem okay, but when you add more data, the problem of suffering, the problems within the Quran, the lack of religious the presence of religious diversity, other contradictions and inconsistencies, the failure of prayer, it increases the probability that that's not the best explanation. There could be another being that is responsible for the Quran, which is distinct from the creator of the universe. So we still have a lot more to do.
Right. I think this the eloquence or the Quranic challenge just doesn't lift off, pretty much, in my opinion. Basically, how do you come to this? Is the very statement that they say that this text is beyond the capacity of human capability, basically. And how do you arrive at that? Because first thing first, not all, or very few humans have given it a shot, pretty much, right? Only Arabic speaking public in the world is hardly 5%, right? And within those that understand classical Arabic, it's only probably 2%, right? So it's a very low percent of people who understand or who can even write the kind of Arabic that the Quranic Arabic is, pretty much. I'm giving 2% is a very huge number, by the way, because of the benefit of the doubt, but it's a very, very low percentage. And not within those, most of those 2% are Muslims, so they're not going to give it a shot, because in their minds they already take it on the faith basis that the eloquence is the highest of the order and from divine, basically. So they're, even if they tried, they would always assume that whatever they have written or whatever kind of other text they have produced is always gonna be inferior to the Quran. So take them out. Now, barring them, there are still very few, Coptic Christians and the Christians in the Egypt and Syria, Lebanon, and all those places who understand Quranic Arabic. Very, very few. And even if they try, most of them wouldn't even want to try, basically, and wouldn't have tried. So the blanket statement that this is beyond the capacity of the humans needs a further more premises to be justified, pretty much, right? So they haven't done this. And secondly, as Madan has already mentioned, and I'll stress on that, even if you say somebody is, even if it's beyond the human capability, all it requires for us to say is that probably there is an alien civilization that is much better at linguistics than us, and they have a capability to probably communicate it to somebody on Earth. That's how it got it over here, or maybe through some other means of communication it got it over here. So all that is needed is these two things. There is no intervention of a supernatural being over here, as you can see, right? So they need Abbas needs a lot more work to kind of go from linguistic argument to God. Madan added kalam as well in the process, and even then we saw that it doesn't take them to a supernatural being, let alone God, basically, because God has some more properties that a general supernatural being would have, pretty much, right? Because we're talking here about God of Islam, right? So yeah, I think we made the point very clear, as much as clear as we could. So.
Just to wrap it up, you could say it's the most elegant or the most simplest explanation to do. If the kalam is proven, for example, or the contingency argument is proven, then the most virtuous theory in terms of, for example, we think the most elegant explanation is that natural selection explains things even 40,000 years ago, right? Well, I mean, one could say that, how do we know that? Maybe there was a different mechanism then, right? And in the same sense, so we make the inference to something that happened 40,000 years ago from principles that we've seen here, etc. And somebody may say then, in the same sense, why can't we just make the inference? We don't need to think about all the counter models or all the possibilities that could have explained the linguistic the Quran, how the Quran came into existence. We don't need to think about all the other possibilities like limited finite beings, because we don't have the existence of any of these limited finite beings. We don't tangibly know them. Whereas we do have it from the contingency argument and the Kalam cosmological argument. And therefore, the most elegant and the most virtuous theory, the simplest theory, is that those two things have a connection together. That God did write the Quran, right? Now, there's a field of other possibilities in between, but none of those possibilities have materialized. In the same sense, there's a field of other possibilities of how 40,000 years ago animals may have come from other animals, or animals may have come from a different source. But we make the inference that natural selection is the mechanism, and we making the inference here that God is the cause between these two things in a very similar sense. But the thing about that you can just challenge it, that it's not the most elegant and not the most simplest theory, because if you just look at it like that, it may seem like it. But with evolution, we've got a lot of other things going on. For example, making lots of good predictions, right? 40,000 years ago, 41,000 years ago, 42,000 years ago, and they're inextricably intertwined and predicting things that we would not even imagine, from molecular biology, from the biodiversity of fossils, RNA, it's a viral evidence, evidence of mutations, etc. Evidence from morphology, the physical structures and states, and they all correlate and converge together to build this massive case. And we don't have anything similar for God like that. But when we do try deeply looking into it, to see whether it is the simplest and most elegant explanation, we have to open this field of data, and then you have to think about all the other stuff: prayer, suffering, inconsistencies and contradictions. The linguistic argument being
Doxastic discord, basically.
all these other issues where religion just doesn't make a good fit. So we can't just look at kalam and the linguistic miracle in isolation and forget the problem of suffering or evil, and forget the failure of prayer, and forget the biodiversity of religion, forget the hiddenness argument for God, forget divine deception. And when you look at all of these arguments, then the most elegant and most simplest theory isn't necessarily the
God argument, yeah.
God argument. You may think that there are limited and finite beings, there are deceptive beings. There is a being, an alien, like you said, masquerading as a god, right? And it could simultaneously be the case there is a god of the cosmos. They could be simultaneously be the case.
Exactly.
God created a genuine God, an omnipotent God. Maybe not like an omnibenevolent God. I don't. But
all right, Martin, we are joined by Otangelo.
Maybe a God who maybe not be omnibenevolent, but a God created the universe. But that there are other species around the universe that are deceiving human beings with these sort of religious books that just are good enough to show a few miracles here and there, but flawed enough to have all these other flaws. And that might be actually a simpler explanation because that fits better with the data.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we have Otangelo. Otangelo, how are you doing? Sorry, you had to wait.
Yes, hi guys. I'm good, thanks. And you? Do you hear me well?
Yeah. You're sounding fabulous. How are you doing?
Good. Yeah, of course. As a Christian, I fully disagree with Madin, and I think that even if evolution would be a thing to explain biodiversity, or organismal complexity, and architecture, even if that would be truthfully explained by evolutionary mechanisms, of course, that wouldn't remove the God hypothesis. I mean, there are theistic evolutionists which believe that God seeded, created planet Earth with chemicals, and then these chemicals on their own formed cells, and then diverse life forms.
Yeah. I think that, I mean, of course, you can espouse that kind of a worldview for sure. But what does your what does your Bible say about that? It does talk about the Adam. And are you a young Earth creationist, by the way?
Yes. Now the thing is,
so for you, these arguments don't make much sense, right?
Right.
Or
for
at
me,
least
they
from your
don't make
worldview, right?
sense. Yes, but I am just addressing what Madin said. Okay.
Ortagalo, just to clarify, I wasn't saying that. I wasn't making an argument that the theory of evolution reduces the likelihood of a God. I didn't make that argument at all. I was talking about, I was using evolution as an example for a different purpose entirely. To explain what a virtuous or simple theory is.
Simpler explanation, basically,
Now the thing is that
you may want to rewind the tape. It wasn't about that.
Okay, now the thing is that if science cannot explain the origin of life by unguided means and biodiversity through evolutionary mechanisms, if the answers are not directing to this direction, then of course the question is, what is the alternative? And I think there are basically just two basic categories here. One where intelligence was involved in creating the universe, life, consciousness, and biodiversity, and the other not. And if your proposition is that the no God hypothesis has superior explanatory power, then you need to have very good reasons and arguments to say that unguided, random, and non-guided events have more causal power, for example, to create blueprints and instructional information as we encounter stored in DNA.
Yeah, just to clarify, that's what we weren't even talking about this topic.
Yeah, we weren't even talking about this
Yeah. I just want
first
to
off.
clarify that. I just want to clarify that we can talk about this topic separately, but I just want to clarify
Yeah, we
what I was
can.
talking
Yeah.
about. What I was talking about is the explaining the. It's very difficult to put this in words. We were talking about whether or not the linguistic argument, the Quranic Islamic linguistic argument plus the Kalam cosmological argument would be good enough to explain.
Existence of Allah.
Yeah, existence of Allah, because Kalam cosmological argument gets you to, for example, obviously, well, not just existence of Allah, but good enough to explain that the Allah wrote the Quran.
Allah
So
wrote the Quran.
yeah,
Yeah.
remember, it's two steps. The Kalam cosmological argument gets you God. Now you need to prove that revelation is true. One of the revelations is true. Christianity versus Islam, and the linguistic argument being true may show, for example, and let's say Christian arguments being false, would show, or an atheistic arguments being false, or something like that. A linguistic argument being true, and the Kalam cosmological argument being true, would mean that the God exists, one, and two, because the linguistic argument is true, God wrote the Quran. And I was trying to debunk that by saying that there could be a whole field of possibilities. It could very well be the cosmological argument is true, and the linguistic argument is true, but God did not write the Quran; some other being did, right? And I was given an example of I was trying to, and now and then I raised the idea that actually somebody may say it's the simplest theory, like evolution is a very simple theory to explain the biodiversity. Look, I'm not when I say the simple theory, I'm not talking about any other God. I'm not comparing to God models. I'm saying that the simplest theory here, I didn't have to use evolution. I could use any other framework of science to explain the virtues of science. In that it predicts things, in that you can make inferences, and to explain the most amount of evidence with the least amount of assumptions. That's what simplicity means in science. And you could use any other form you can use germ theory, for example, to explain it. To make the same point. And it's very elegant. Germ theory is very elegant. Evolution is very elegant. It explains the whole sort of, and somebody may use the fact of the precepts of science, of simplicity considerations to say, actually, it is the most simplest explanation that the cause of Kalam, God, created the Quran, right? And not just some other explanation in the middle, like an alien or some other being. That is the most simplest explanation. Yeah, just like evolutionary mechanism of simple explanations. And then what I said, actually, no, it's not simple like evolution, because if we restrict ourselves just with the Kalam cosmological argument and the linguistic argument, yes, it looks very simple. But then what about all the other data? The biodiversity of religions, the failure of prayer, the hiddenness argument for God, etc., etc. If those go through, and the Quran fails to explain that, and other stuff like errors in the Quran, weird stuff about the Quran that's not predicting, it's not talking about things within the 19th century, the 20th century properly in detail. It's very geographically limited to the people of the time. It's morality. When you add all those things out, it's actually not the most simplest theory to think the God created it, or the cause of Kalam
God
created.
wrote it, basically.
So it can be simultaneously true that contingency argument is true, the Kalam cosmological argument is true, but there's other finite beings around the universe that rather is the best explanation to explain the Quran, and not those.
And that the Quran was not written by humans, basically.
See that
both could go through at the same time.
Of course, as a Christian, I don't believe that the Quran is inspired by the Creator. Okay, so we are on the same page in regards of that. And as a Christian, of course, I believe that the God of the Bible is the true Creator, is the true God which created the universe and everything physical, right? Now, I don't either think that the most parsimonious explanation is necessarily the best explanation or the true explanation, okay? So I don't think this is a good criteria. Now, you talked about predictions. I have actually written a science paper about 61 predictions of intelligent design that can be falsified. And so far, I have not seen anyone being able to falsify just one of these 61. So I think that the God hypothesis stands on very solid evidential grounds, and yeah, I mean, I can make scientific predictions based on intelligent design, as I'm done,
Right.
and
Before
the
you proceed,
predictions
can you
can
tell
be
me?
falsified.
Yeah, before you proceed, can you tell me what you mean by parsimony?
Excuse me?
Before you proceed, can you tell me what you mean by parsimony or parsimonious explanation?
Yeah, the most simple explanation, the one which needs less complexity and parts to explain something. So,
Yeah, I don't agree with that either.
All right, guys, can I pause you both for a
Yeah.
second? I'll take this comment from Mike Malzan. Sorry, my bad. Can this guy tell us where Gog and Magog are? So I think Mike is an ex-Christian. Otangelo, probably you are familiar with him. So
yeah,
he's
it
probably
is
addressing you.
it,
He's probably
it,
addressing you.
yeah, it is a prophetic expression. I don't think anyone has a certain answer to that question.
Right, right. I think that there is a copied story in Quran as well about Gog and Magog, basically, and they are behind an iron wall. Where it is, I think nobody knows. I think that's a problem that both Christians and Muslims have to deal with. In any case, okay, Madan, I don't
Yeah.
know whom I
So
stopped. Basically, yeah.
yeah. So I don't accept that criteria of parsimony either. So I don't think that something that has least amount of assumptions is necessarily true if you define it quantitatively. Yeah, so I subscribe to a form of Occam razor, which is not to do with numbers or quantities, but more to do with qualities, right? It's the qualitative interpretation of Occam's razor or parsimony. And so I do think parsimony is a criteria of science and is a good way of determining what's true versus what's false. But that's because we define it. Maybe we have a different understanding of parsimony, right? So obviously something being more complex doesn't mean it's less true, because there's plenty of things that are very complicated and convoluted. When we look through, for example, the history of humanity, the periodic table is more complicated than, for example, the four elements. DNA is very complicated than, let's say, a very simple theory of the soul, let's say. But sorry, not simple theory, like a simple theory of life. A life just emerged out of water or something. Then DNA kind of coding it over many years. One is more complicated in the sense it has more complexity to it. Let's say it's more quantitatively more complex, but it's more like it's true. So I agree with that. That assessment, that interpretation of Occam razor is correct. I instead subscribe to Bertrand Russell's interpretation of Occam's razor, which is the qualitative interpretation, which is similar to probabilities, right? It's a probabilistic theories. The reason why, for example, we say, let's say a light switch goes, let's say the light bulb goes off in your house. Now, let's say you have two theories. One theory, the national grid in your area short-circuited, the entire grid, right, in your city. That would explain it, would it? Yeah, it would. But then you have another theory, which is that the light bulb fused in your house. We will say the most parsimonious or the simplest theory would explain it, which is that the light bulb fused in your house, rather than the more complex one. But what do we mean by that? Are we talking about quantities? No. What we mean is that frequently, based on our background evidence and probabilities, lights, when they go off, it's more likely that your light got fused in your house than the national grid, because the national grid doesn't go off that much, maybe once or twice a year. But everybody's have get fused regularly, more regularly, and it happens more commonly, right? It's more likely. And that is what we mean by parsimonious. That's what I mean by parsimonious explanation. And that is a better interpretation of Occam's razor. So the most simplest explanation would be that the light bulb got fused in the house and not the entire nation's, electricity going off.
Yeah, by the way, I saw the title of your stream, Try to Convince Us that God exists in order not to go to hell. And my standard answer to that challenge is always that Christ's command to his church wasn't to try to convince unbelievers to believe. It was to declare, to spread the gospel, and then those which would come to believe to disciple them. So the process of coming to believe isn't something that we should or are demanded to engage in. So it is the listener that has to evaluate what we are saying and then make up his mind on his own.
Yeah, I think you did mention this last time, Otangelo. So I think we are well aware. And do not take us otherwise. I think we like you coming over here. Perfectly fine. You can come anytime. Our conversation, even if we all do have different worldviews than you and other Christian or Muslim callers. I hope, and you see that as well, that our conversations are very cordial. We don't demean anybody. At least try not to, unless until somebody starts to do that. It has happened in past, probably once or twice, that somebody started doing that, and so yes, and we do understand that. But I think the title is more for our Muslim callers than our Christian callers. So yeah, you understand. And as you know, most of the Hindus even don't even come over here to convince, or because they have vastly different. We did have a couple of Hindu callers in our stream, and so everybody's welcome. And we understand if you have a different take on our title, basically, that's perfectly fine. But it's probably we can't come up with one title that fits to all the versions of theistic, groups that are out there, basically, right? Christianity, Hinduism, Judaism. Probably the title is not going to fit all that well. Bar probably
Okay.
Islam.
Yeah, no, I understand. No problem.
So yeah, I mean, and you, I just wanted to address your problem with the abiogenesis. You mentioned that, right? To move ahead with abiogenesis and saying that because abiogenesis cannot occur, and that's why God. I think you'll have to provide just more than mere saying that, the probabilities are low, that's why God. You'll have to decisively say that it is impossible that abiogenesis cannot occur, right?
Yeah,
And for
I
that,
would
hold on,
actually,
let
I
me
w-
let, let me just finish. Let me just finish.
yeah,
And for that, you'll have to say not abiogenesis can not only not occur on Earth, but cannot occur on any part of the universe. And you'll have to
yeah,
do that to come to the conclusion that's why God did it, basically. And even then, as we Madan and I just spoke about this thing, the same thing, Quran challenge, just because abiogenesis cannot occur in this universe, that's why God. I think you need a further few premises that you need to substantiate to come to the God as being the originator of the life,
yeah.
basically.
I
You
I
see the
use
point I'm trying
actually
to make
two.
here?
Yeah, I actually use two approaches here. One is eliminative induction. That if you have two propositions only, and they are contrary one to the other, and one is demonstrably false, then the other is necessarily true. Okay, this is one approach, and the other is
No,
positive
just
evidence.
saying demonstrably false does not mean impossible, right? Because your demonstration might be. I mean, I think maybe it's an issue with the terminology that we two are using, basically, right? I mean, what do you mean by demonstrably false? As in, it's impossible, right? Should I take it that way?
Well, I know that in science you cannot talk about absolute proof. You can do that only mathematics. So we should never say something is impossible. So we should always leave a way open to say it seems not to be possible, but who knows? Maybe tomorrow science comes up with a different hypothesis, tests it, and then corroborates it to be true. But what I say is based on my research that I am sufficiently certain to say with boldness that I think that life from non-life by unguided means is statistically in the realm of the impossible. And I've just published a trilogy of 3 books which span over 1900 pages, and there I collect about 2000 questions which science hasn't an answer for, and it's not because science hasn't investigated sufficiently, but it is a problem of it's a conceptual problem, and that makes it for me pretty certain that an intelligence and guidance is necessary to create life.
Right. So, in without looking at what you're talking about, it's very difficult to say what that is. Obviously, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. But so you're just saying, for example, there's things that can't be explained in science, and the best explanation is a designer. I just disagree that designers are explanation for intelligence and complexity. It's because we've already got a very good knowledge base from induction. So how I think about it is bottom up rather than top down, right? Bottom up. What bottom up theory is building from what we know already, and that's how kind of the philosophy of science behind evolution and these and physicalism or naturalism generally works. In general, non-conscious processes does explain even very complex things. Now we see a big sample of things in history of humanity that we thought was once upon a time inexplicable through unguided, non-conscious processes, but then eventually we did come to learn, for example, that in fact it is possible to explain it the entirety, that it has the necessary and sufficient conditions to explain that thing. That could be anything ranging from the eye to the hearing and different organs, or something like, for example, planets, solar systems. Once you build up a base, a sound base of inductive knowledge like that, now we have higher prior probability. I can't speak anymore. Higher probability to elect that as an answer, or qualify or hold other sort of explanations like non-design hypothesis, for example, as give lower credence to it, right? Give it lower credence to it for that reason. So when you come around, let's say, and you go, here's some holes in evolution, or here's some holes in, here's some complex things. We've already gone through that. We've explained mysteries like that, right? Over and over and again. So statistically speaking, when you present to me another statistical difficulty, I am not saying that that's not a statistical difficulty. Maybe that is, or this isn't. But we've overcome those previous statistical difficulties with natural explanations, either through evolution or some non-evolutionary physical process. Therefore, it's more likely even that mystery is to be explained through those evolutionary or non-evolutionary physical processes as well. A higher probability. So this is argument. You can say it's an argument from naturalism, argument from physicalism, or etc. So this is how I look at it. I understand there's lots of mysteries even within evolution, but I think whenever I come to not being able to explain something in, like, say, the cell, I would think it'll have a biological explanation that we don't know, rather than going, it probably has this kind of spiritual explanation that was failed each time in the past. That's how I kind of look at it.
Yeah, I know what you try to imply. So, but what I am saying is not a God of the gaps argument, or an argument which is based on lack of knowledge. It is actually precisely based on what science has uncovered, unraveled, put on the table, and now based on what we do know, we can make actually statistical probability calculations. And I think it's precisely those which lead to the inference which I am making. And I don't know if previously in one of the chats that I participated here on your channel, I brought it up, but the statistical possibility to have just one protein polymer or amino acid sequence which is complex and specified is already in the realm of the statistically extremely unlikely and improbable. So you can have the entire time span of the entire universe. You can shuffle with all the atoms at the highest speed possible to then try by chance to get a functional sequence, and it's extremely unlikely that you'll get it. That's just for one protein. Now,
Right,
if you
right.
take the
Okay, hold on,
minimal
hold on,
cell,
hold on.
Yeah,
Let's go
yeah,
step by step. Let's
yeah.
go step by step, right? First thing first, you talk about the protein sequence, right? So let's get the probabilities. And why do you think those probabilities are the probabilities those that are there? So you use the same science basically. Do you believe the universe is 13.8 billion years old? Why do
no,
you
as I
believe?
said, I
Why do
am
you
a
believe
young
that?
Earth creationist, but I brought it up just because that's what usually people believe, that the
Right.
universe
So
has this
now,
age. So it's only to
so you,
reference the
it's no use
probability
for you to
argument.
give that argument, right?
Yeah,
No, no,
I'm
Because
just
you think
using that time span
no.
to make the
Hold on. Yeah.
probability argument.
The reason I'm saying is because not you probably because you don't even believe in the 13.8-year-old universe,
yeah,
but
I think,
those who use
Philo,
that.
Philo,
Yeah.
I don't think we should go down that route, saying that if
No,
you're
no.
just,
I'm just giving a single
let's just,
thing for
yeah,
evolution, basically, right? That those people who think that the evolution cannot be true use the same inductive arguments to come up to the age of the universe as 13.8 billion is. I'll leave it at that, basically, right?
yeah, but
I'll just leave it at that.
that's true. That's true. But I wouldn't say Ortangalo's case will fail that way. He's not saying that he doesn't accept
No, no,
science.
I'm not saying his case
Yeah,
will fail. That's why
yeah,
I said not his case. Basically, it's
yeah, yeah.
for
Well, I
those
mean,
who deny evolution.
I
Basically,
also think he can get around that. For example, if it's true that certain forms of science, for example, proves the existence of a god, then through that mechanism, then he can disqualify other forms of science. That's a consistent position. For example, so I know what you're trying to say. Said on the same breath, you accept all this biology, or all this protein synthesis stuff that comes from science. Why do you not accept?
no. I'm saying you
Right.
use the same principles to come to the age of the universe. That is the inductive principle of taking some equations back to the origin of the universe,
Yeah.
and then you don't trust that the similar reasoning works for evolution through fossil records tracing back to the first cell, pretty much, right? If not first cell,
Okay.
but at
Slightly
least
different way
the
of saying it.
multicellular element. That's
Yeah.
the argument I'm trying to make
Okay,
here.
okay. So yes, Philo, you're saying something different to what I understood.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that sounds right. Well, yeah, okay. In the sense that, well, even then, Tangalo is saying that because of there's differences, right? Proteins can't form on their own, whereas maybe there's no issue like that when it comes to the universe.
No, his
What?
argument is proteins cannot form
Mm,
because there's not enough time in the universe because
yes,
13.8 billion years
yeah,
is
yes,
little too less for them to form. You would probably need trillions or quadrillions of years
yes,
for a single chain of amino acids to form. Basically, that's
yes,
the argument he's trying to make.
yes.
And I'm saying, how do you know that to be true? Because you don't have any good handle on the age of the universe, because with your same principle you'll fail it coming at the proper age of the universe as well. That's the argument I'm trying to make.
Well, the thing is that we can actually make a statistical analysis, and that is really math. So when you do that, then you see that in order to have a functional amino
Okay,
acid sequence of 100 amino acids, which is about a third of an average sized protein amino acid polymer chain, you have already a statistical possibility of 1 to 10 to the 130th power. Now, if you
okay.
take 300 amino acids, then it will be in the order of 1 to
Tangalo,
10 to 250. So that's far beyond of all the resources that we have, which the threshold is 1 to 10 to
so Ontangalo,
139.
Ontangalo. There's plenty of
Atangalo, you're mathematics. Are you do you have a mathematics background, by the way?
Well, my education is machine designer. I've learned to design
How much
machines.
of a probability theory have you do you understand Markovian chains?
No, I don't.
Okay. Do you understand stochastic processes in probability theory?
No, I've not studied that.
Okay, maybe I'll ask you to read up those two things, right? When you come next time. Okay? And then maybe I'll explain it to you why your argument is flawed. Right?
If you untangle it, if you want to look at this argument has been expressed many times over since 60s, 50s, and 40s. If you, I'm trying to think of an easy sort, like a something that I find very persuasive. If you look at on infidels.com, maybe even somebody like Richard Carrier, who kind of compiles a response to the intelligent design argument like this, or designer argument, where because of based on statistics, based on odds, for example, it's impossible for the protein to form, or a single amino acid chain, or a chain of amino acids, etc., polymers, etc., is difficult to form. There's plenty of kind of
okay, I'll explain it briefly, Mahadan, as to why I asked that question.
No,
right?
no, let me just finish what I'm saying though.
Okay, sorry.
There's plenty of advocates of this argument throughout the history of humanity who've made these sort of similar arguments, and they've been debunked one by one for multiple reasons. And Carrier he specifically goes into each one. Each theorist, even like people like Francis Crick, I think it was, who made similar arguments, etc. And explains that there's issues with, for example, regarding sample size, time. There's issues with, for example, the number of different types of functional proteins. We don't actually have a grasp of all the different types of functional proteins. Two, the fact that protein functions and properties change over time. Yeah, therefore we don't really have a probability distribution. Two, we try to think that the modern day protein molecule has to form in one go, right? When we're talking about natural selection, which is a long drawn out process over hundreds of thousands, millions, then billions of years, right? And when we do it like that, then it's very different, for example. So reality is the main gist of the criticism is that probability distribution errors, right? Probability distribution errors. We think that that many amino acids are the only type of amino acids. We think that many protein functions are the only type of functions. We think that there are no other form of function. We don't know that, for example. We also don't know if there are intermediate functions that it used to have in different arrangements. For example, a protein might have, and that we know this from evolution. Through evolution, for example, different things have different functions during its evolutionary course, right? The functions of the eye didn't just pop out of nothing, right? When it was more underdeveloped, it had different functions, and so the functions change and gradually grow. And then the same kind of is applicable to the domain of proteins as well. For functions might be different. So when you do that, yes, you're right. If we just eliminate all that knowledge, if we think that it has to have that function from these sort of amino acids, and that it can't be any other arrangement. But reality is we don't know the scope of different types of arrangements that it can form, and therefore there are probability distribution errors. And that same flaw is in, I'm explaining it after many years of reading this, so it's not fresh in my head. So I can go back and revise all this and come back and talk to you about it more precisely. But
yeah,
Richard
I just want to, Martin, just wanted to add a very
this.
simple answer to this, right? And simple answer was the question I asked, and you briefly mentioned it, but you didn't go into depth. Why I asked Ottangelo to go and read up on stochastic processes and Markovian processes or Markovian chains is precisely because of that. Because in short, Ottangelo and whatever studies he has cited are using stochastic process. Each bond, when it comes into fruition, is stochastic unto its own. Basically, it's starting from random and from the very beginning. But he's not taking into consideration that those are the useful bits, basically. Whatever, let's say if a chain is built up of 2 amino acids, it's a useful chain for that time. And then those 2 add up to 2 more, that they become 4, then 4 add up to 4 more. And it's a kind of an exponential process in which it's not stochastic anymore. It's a Markovian chain, basically. Which means that the process is going much higher rate rather than
let me address this.
Rate, basically.
Let me address this. Now, the thing with the probability argument, which I bring up, is to make a point. But the problem of the origin of life is far deeper. I've left here in the private chat a link that you guys can look up. Before that, we even come to talk about what the probability would be to have a meaningful sequence of amino acids. First, you need to have these amino acids prebiotically. And this is already a unsurmountable, a huge, huge problem to which science doesn't have an answer. And one of the reasons why it is such a huge, huge problem is that there was no evolutionary mechanism, there was no natural selection extant prebiotically before self-replication and life started.
Yeah,
And
but
you
but,
need
but
a,
there's another
I
thing,
think
Antonio.
Miller
Again, Antonio.
Urey
Yeah.
experiment were pretty decisive,
no,
right?
it was
Even
not
though
conductive. Let me quick finish here.
no,
It
you
wasn't
you know I know what
conductive.
your answer is gonna be, and I'm
It
gonna refute
wasn't
your answer.
conductive because you need a set, a very specific, a specified set of 20 amino acids amongst hundreds, which supposedly were extant prebiotically. And there was no
Angelo,
selection mechanism to
sample
select
size.
those 20 which
Yeah.
are used in life. This already is a huge problem.
No, this is not a huge problem because you think so. You think that life could only arise on Earth, and you don't think it could be transported through
Your sam-
meteor showers or asteroids or anything
Antangelo,
else.
Antangelo, your
So
sample size.
your objection is only valid if there were only one Earth in the whole universe.
Yeah,
Then
but
your
by the way,
objection
yeah,
would be valid.
Antangelo, your sample size is wrong because it's not just merely on Earth, but merely on any habitable any planet, right? So we're talking about a trillion laboratories, right? And
Well, you
furthermore,
know, I also
Tr-
wrote
tr-
a book on cosmology and on fine tuning, and I collected 469.
hello. Atangelo, please
that's a different topic. Yeah.
stick to one topic.
Yeah.
I know you are eager to point out all. We'll tackle all of those
One
at
by
some
one.
other point. But let's stick to this problem of probabilities. You said that was your primary argument, right? Let's deal with this first, and then
Okay,
we're gonna go to fine tuning and all other problems, right?
okay.
Yeah, I think let's tackle it
Well, I
because
don't think that what you came up with stochastic events and so forth actually is a powerful or good refutation of the
it
argument.
is very powerful refutation of your, because you don't know. You have to decisively prove to us that all these chains of amino acids forming a protein sequence is indeed independently stochastic. You understand
Oh,
that?
I don't know. I don't have to
The burden of
provide
proof
any
is on
proofs.
you.
All I need to do
Burden of
is
proof
to
is on you.
demonstrate that the design hypothesis has superior explanatory power than random chance. That's all what I need to do. I do not have to prove anything.
No, you have to, because you have said that it has a very low probability, and you gave the numbers precisely because of that reason. And that's why I said that your numbers are bunk.
Yeah.
If we
They are really terrible numbers and terrible mathematic. Whoever the mathematician was, William Dembski or uh, whoever
No,
that guy was
I mean,
really very.
no, it wasn't
It's
William
really
Dembski.
Dembski, I would say.
There are science papers of the Royal Society that is not something which comes
Doesn't
from the intelligent design camp.
doesn't mean
This
a
is
jack
something
who that guy was. If
no, this is universally known
no,
that
it's not universally known. Have you read the papers that have refuted this argument? Which ones have you read?
there are no papers which refute this
And
argument.
if I gave you the paper, would you leave the Christianity tomorrow? I'll give you the paper.
Well, the argument isn't about Christianity.
All
The
right.
argument
So
is
then
about
there you
if
go. You don't.
intelligent design is a superior explanation for the origin
See,
of
you're
amino acid sequences which have
all right,
function
Madan.
rather than chance. That is the
all right,
question.
so
That is the argument.
All right, hold on, just for a minute.
It's not
Jimmy
about
is also here.
Christianity.
Jimmy, I think, joined for a bit. Is that the same Jimmy who joined earlier? Hello, Jimmy.
Yes, this is the same Jimmy. Hello.
All right, your voice is really low. Can you speak up a bit or come closer to your mic?
Okay, sir. Okay. Uh,
I
am I
can't hear
audible?
you properly.
Hello.
Martin, can you
Jimmy,
hear Jimmy?
Jimmy, which part of America are you in?
Well, I'm
I
not
think
in
he's
America.
I'm joking.
yeah, the
It's a joke.
United
It's a joke. It's a joke. Don't answer that.
United Indian America.
Yeah. So, hello.
Jimmy is from India.
That's why I asked. I was joking around.
Yeah, I knew that. I knew. All right, Jimmy,
So
what do you have? Otangelo, if you don't mind, we'll just take up a quick question from Jimmy and see if we can address it, and then we'll get back to you. But
Sure.
I think we also have to close the stream. So, Jimmy,
yes,
go ahead,
so,
shoot your question.
sir, my question was kind of silly, but I think I have to ask. Like, can I can I can I convince an illiterate person regarding this disbelief or atheism? Like, are the problem of evil or uh, the argument of divine hiddenness are enough to convince someone uh, to not to believe in some supernatural higher power? Or do
Uh,
we need a
it
strong
should
scientific background to believe in it?
it should at least increase their credence into non-existence of God much higher than it is, right? You cannot reach to a level of 100% certainty either way, basically. But you can reach a credence level, which is, say, if you gave all those arguments, divine hiddenness or problem of evil or doxastic discord and all these problems that even Mahadan mentioned quite a few times within this stream, you can based on that you can say the credence level is probably 60 to 70% that a god of Islam doesn't exist, or a god of Christianity doesn't exist, or uh, Vishnu, Shiva, or Brahma. These gods don't exist, and all those things, right? So you can give case by case basis. You cannot exclude them to a 0%. I mean, you cannot exclude them to 100%, but you can go to a credence that they don't exist more likely than not 80%, 80% or 90%, right? Even Dawkins' scale is on based on a similar thing. Pretty much, it goes. Even Dawkins himself doesn't say that he's like 100% convinced that God doesn't exist, right? So any well-read atheist or agnostic would have the humbleness to say that, yes, I mean, I'm not 100% sure. They'll have that certain level of uncertainty in their answers, right?
Okay, sir.
Does that answer
Thank
your
you.
question? Madhin, you want to add something to it?
No, it's all right. You answered it.
All right, Jimmy. Is
Thank you,
that
sir.
all? Maybe
That's
maybe you can join some other time when you have a better mic system. I think your voice is so
okay, sir.
low that I had to really pay attention to listen to you.
Okay, sir. I will sort it out. Sir. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, your voice is really low. Maybe fix your mic system next time you come in, right? All right. Thanks for dropping by, Jimmy. All right. Talk to you later.
All right, this on Tanglo. So, in terms of early life, you're talking about an early progenitor or a precursor set of rudimentary molecules, and we don't actually know what those exactly are. There's a lot of hot debate and speculation, but so the exact structures of that is at this moment is very similar to. It's actually less credible than the cosmological sciences right now. It's in flux. So we're not talking about a modern day protein. Of course, a modern day protein coming along banging into existence with a few processes is going to be very difficult when reality modern day proteins form after a series of events for millions of years, millions and millions of years, right? So what we're talking about at a prebiotic sort of stage, at a stage where it's actually really not known. We're not talking about modern day chains. I mean, we're talking about very, very simple molecules. And given the simplicity, it might be actually more likely, etc. And you don't just think about this planet; you think about the trillions of planets where these experiments. You can call it like an experiment. You can think of it like a probability theorem or probability experiment, where people rolling dice of flipping coins, for example, and in each planet there's lots of lotteries being played. People rolling dice, flipping coins, playing the lottery. This is an analogy, obviously. Mathematically, therefore, the chances will increase, etc. When you have, but we don't really know the variables. We don't really know those things. Even those papers that they talk about it very speculatively. It's like a shock to the system that this particular protein or that particular molecule can form, but we don't know the variables. Let me just give you one example that changes things when it comes to the probabilities of things. For example, gene duplication changes the probability. Gene duplication, which is like a biological replication of a section of the DNA that makes it such that you've got two strands, and that increases the probability for positive mutations to form, increases the chance of evolution. So there was a point in time where we didn't know about this mechanism called gene duplication. But once we learned about gene duplication, what it does is it provides a secondary copy of a section of DNA. I might be getting it slightly wrong. A biologist will correct me, but I think the gist of it is correct. I'm not a biologist. A secondary, a second copy of the gene, and that frees up the possibilities for mutations to occur, because now you got two copies. So even if one of them gets really, really damaged through negative mutations, the other copy can take function, right? So when you have lots of gene duplications happening, it allows for natural selection to act, mutations to act, to change the genetic algorithms, let's say, right?
In parallel, basically.
Yeah. And then create eventually, in parallel, to eventually create a sequence that creates a positive mutation or mutations that produce a function that is fit for the environment. And that without that gene duplication, it may have been the case that it was highly unlikely. But then when we learned about the new variable of gene duplication, it changed things. How many other variables are like there? Now, there's many. I'm not a biologist. I'm not a microbiologist. There's plenty. When I learn these things, I learn a lot more. We don't know such variables or mechanisms at early Earth, on early Earth, that would increase the probabilities for early molecules to form. There could be various mechanisms. And why do I say could be? Why am I not certain? I'm saying I'm going to hedge my bets more and put my odds on that, given that we have a frequency of these sort of explanations explaining things. Even what you're saying, therefore, that you're not doing a God of the gaps. I'm not saying that you're doing a God of the gaps. I'm saying every time you come and find something now that seems like a highly unlikely to be explained through mechanisms that we know of, I would say that's not good enough for me to, for example, hedge my bets on a designer theory, given that's failed so many times, one, and two, given the credence that I give to naturalism to explain those probability mysteries. Because once we uncover the variables, once we really find out the distribution, once we know the real facts, we always solve it. Yeah, if the history track record wasn't like that, I won't say that. Then it'll be a bias. But because we got such a strong track record, I think I've got good reasons, inductive reasons to think that's the case.
Yeah, true that. I agree with that. Tangelo, sorry, I muted your mic because we were getting static noise from your side. Go ahead.
Is still noise or is it okay now?
No, we are still getting. Can you guys hear static noise from Tangelo's side?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's louder now. It's louder.
I think
now.
Tangelo is doing his own abiogenesis in his laboratory to create life, isn't he? That's why.
Well, Martin, I think you are looking from
Tangelo, you the static noise from your side is too disconcerting by the way. Too disturbing. In the meanwhile, what we'll do is we'll chat with Islamic Sword channel for a bit. Can you fix your mic, Tangelo?
Well, I am trying. I am switching mode to see which one that.
What I'm gonna do is until you fix it, I'll mute you for a bit. All right, Bakas.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. How are you guys?
Bakas, Pretty good.
Mm,
You joined a little late, and I would say you join in Hindi streams probably. Wouldn't that be Hindi Urdu streams? Probably wouldn't that be better? But go ahead.
no
What do
issue.
you have? What do you have?
No issue. No issue. It's better for me to join Hindi streams because I can give you a better response if I can understand the things and everything.
Okay, okay. I mean,
Fahim?
if you want to shoot your question, and let's see if we want to take it, then we'll take it, and then otherwise, then we'll see. I'll see you in Hindi Urdu stream, right? The you okay? Waqas has left already. Okay. I think yeah, it's better if I mean, there's no disrespect to Waqas per se, but if it's better if it's easier for both sides to understand each other's argument, at least that part should be very clear basically. And unless and if we are not able to understand each other's arguments, then probably we're gonna have a tougher time. So
Yeah, so I do want to make a comment on this, right? I mean, what do you mean the honest truth is these people don't want to be convinced? Did this person want to be convinced that we're the type of people who want to be convinced? So he's got his own hypocrisy there, right?
yeah.
Right? Were you open to the fact of knowing our background, our understandings, our histories, our education, our personalities, in order to arrive at that conclusion? I don't think you did. So you weren't open to the truth yourself here. So you should use your own principle and apply it to yourself without exuding hypocrisy, because reality is I don't know if Antongelo knows. We generally, for example, with Antongelo, even on the show, we give credence to his arguments. We accept certain things. I even defend him sometimes when Philo goes on the attack, biting on Tangelo's ass. I say, actually, wait, Philo, you might be wrong.
I don't attack anyone.
Yeah. So I think, but
Well,
no, and we don't know.
Who told you guys that I don't like it?
so he's into that stuff. That was a good response.
Just kidding.
But we try to be as fair-minded as possible. And reality is, Hussein, if you don't know our backgrounds, we've been very open-minded about things, and I don't want to comment exactly on Philo. He can comment for himself. I was a philosophy student, and I did my best to actually defend Islam in many quarters as I could, right? And I in my mind, I did a fair assessment, an open assessment, and I generally challenge my views more than embrace them. In other words, if I have a particular viewpoint, I try to attack it more. That's how I approach things usually. So I'm generally skeptical of things. So it's not the case that I've not been open to the truth. Philo may have his own story, but he's also like that, I guess. So I think that's an unfair characterization. You don't even know us.
Yeah, I think we are both open to. I think we have mentioned it quite a few times that we are open to accepting. I've mentioned it on many Dawa channels, Islamic channels that I have been to, that I'm open to accepting their if they present it, if they can provide sufficient evidence for me to get convinced. I'm open to accepting their worldview pretty much, which happens to be Islam pretty much, right? Or for that matter, Christianity, or for that matter, Hinduism, or whatever, Sanatan Dharma or Buddhism, right? I'm open for that. But the same problem I find in each and every one of them. They are so rigid. They think that their worldview is the right one. I mean, yeah, but this guy's comment doesn't make sense because we are open. He hasn't really, examined us that closely or listened to our channel as closely.
Yeah, and the final thing that is saying that this sort of discussion leads to nothing is I don't believe so. I mean, that's a subjective thing. Whether it's valuable to you it's valuable to you or not. But I don't think it's nothing if for example, it's true that naturalism is true,
or secularism, that we need to live our life through a secular moral philosophy. I mean, you can still have important, it's as though the existence of God is correct, and or everything else is just pointless or something. It's not the case. You can make a case for secular morality.
It's a very false kind of a dichotomy in the sense, basically.
Or maybe he's not saying that. Maybe he's just saying that the discussion leads to nothing. Well, why? So
Yeah, but I'm saying I'm probing a little too deep into that, because these discussions are good. Because if let's say there is no Islamic God, then some of the injunctions that you use for that, say women are not allowed to drive, for example, I'm saying, if there is an injunction, then you have to consider that, oh, there is no reason for us not to allow women to drive. And that's what happened in Saudi Arabia. Whatever, even if that came from through Islam or even through some other religion, people need to get out of that to see that, okay, something that they believe to be wrong, and then they exercise some injunctions through that belief system, maybe don't make any sense, and we can have a better life by discarding those belief systems, right? So yeah, I mean, these discussions do lead to, on a deeper level, do lead to something good, pretty much, and even if, let's say, as Artangelo is saying, that Christianity is true, if let's say if believing in Jesus Christ gives you the salvation, then that's a fact. Then maybe it's better for myself, Mahaden and myself and Kali, to believe in that. So yeah, I think it's a win-win for all the sides, pretty much, right?
Well, of course, it's better to believe in that if it's actually true. And that is the big question which religions fight about. If Islam is true, which claims that Christ wasn't crucified, is the Bible true, which actually testifies that Christ was crucified and did resurrect? This is what these discussions are about.
Right. Yeah, I think those are next layer questions, probably like 4 layers down. Maybe not for Christ. Maybe the question about Christ is layer 2 question. Layer 1 question is, does the God exist? Right. I think Otangelo, your mic seems right, but I think we are gonna close the stream in a bit. We are already reaching 3-hour mark. We'll chat with Seeing for a bit. I think Seeing has been he just dropped out.
Yeah, just
he heard that we will be closing the stream, and he
Yeah.
just dropped out. And I said I will talk to him for a bit. Anyway, Seeing, sorry, I didn't mean to for you to leave, but if that's what you wanted, then that's what you wanted. All right, Otangelo, you had something to add, or Madan?
No, since you are closing the stream, it's always nice to be with you guys. You are always very respectful, and I appreciate that. And it's good in that way to share ideas.
Yeah, definitely. We love having you on the stream as well. And the discussions are always good. But I think we agree to disagree on our arguments. You think few of your arguments are pretty strong, and we think the other way. But I think I think who wrote that book, the God and the DNA or something? Is it William Dembski's book, or whose book is it? Who's the other one, Madan?
Signature.
Yeah, Signature in the DNA, right? Signature in the DNA.
Signature in the Cell is from Stephen
Signature in
Meyer.
the Cell or something like that,
Stephen
right?
Meyer.
Yes, Signature in the
Stephen
Cell by
Myers.
Stephen Meyer.
Stephen
Yes.
Myers, right? Okay,
Yes.
all right. So I think that that book has some flaws, and I think it's too simplistic, and it's calculations of probability, all these probabilities, right? There's some quite a few big errors in our opinion. Maybe we can drop.
Yeah, I think I basically what I'm saying is that from the history of the mechanisms that we've discovered, etc., that are unknown. There's probably unknown variables and mechanisms at the beginning of the Earth.
Yeah,
Combined with
that's one of the
combined-
reasons that. Yeah.
combined with the fact that there are trillions of planets, and when you add all those things up, I don't think we can really get to a real probability distribution. And furthermore,
Exactly.
we don't know the exact type of precursor molecule that we're dealing with, right? What sort of structure they have. We have some examples. It's still a competitive science. To say that we know that it's highly unlikely for life to form, therefore, based on that, I think it's too strong of a conclusion, and therefore we can't hedge out. We can't really claim, make inferences of design from that. That nature cannot produce any of this. Therefore, we need to infer a designer. Particularly when we've had very similar versions of this at every level, and now we've got it back to the back of the at the beginning of life, right? We had it at every level: the eye, the ear, the humans. This organ, that organ, this part, the space, and each time we learn more about it, and we get the correct probability distribution, and then we realize, oh, actually, whilst unlikely, there was enough chance for it to happen naturally, right? Given the size of the universe, and that itself, for me, is a background sort of evidence. Yeah, call it the non-conscious inductive base. So what happens now is whenever I get presented with any sort of confusing probability distribution, I'm asking what other mechanisms, unknown variables, naturally are there, right? And this would be a bias if everything was equal at equal footing, but it's not equal. We have, because of the track record, the non-conscious inductive base is like the racehorse that has been won in the history of humanity. So I have better odds to bet on this than the theist hypothesis. That's it. Or the designer hypothesis. Forget theism, designer hypothesis, because intelligent design doesn't deal with, at least on paper, on the face of it, a god or a theism. Is dealing with some sort of designer, intelligent one, maybe not even supremely powerful. Even that I don't think is necessarily the case. Because of
I agree. I mean, yeah, the design argument is only going to take you to take you so far, basically, right? Not nowhere close to the Christian God, basically, or the Islamic God, basically. Anyway, sorry, Tangelo, we didn't give you time, but your mic was decent enough. If you want to take a minute or two to respond to this, and then we'll
I am of course disagreeing with Madin in regards of his confidence that evolution explains the origin of biocomplexity, the eye, and all these sort of things. I am currently writing a science paper on self-differentiation and self-fate, which is something which goes right to the core, which needs an explanation. How did cells start to differentiate in order then to be possible to have multicellular organisms with organs and with eyes and all this kind of stuff? And my conclusion, based on what I have already investigated, is that the gene-centric view is very simplistic, and it has already been refuted also by mainstream science. We know it's not just information stored in DNA which is involved in self-fate and differentiation. It is a whole lot more. And I collected a total so far of about 250 epigenetic codes, languages, and signaling pathways. And just in order, just quick finish and follow what I am saying, please, and then you answer, okay? And only in order to have self-fate and differentiation, there are 94 different epigenetic codes involved, which operate in a synergistic manner. That means
Tangelo,
they work in a joint venture together.
Yes, but on Tangelo,
you cannot explain that with evolutionary.
On Tangelo, but modern day biology doesn't exclude the possibility of epigenetic. It's a growing field, and in fact, is compatible with the naturalistic hypothesis. Evolutionary mechanisms like natural selection and epigenetics are, in principle,
compatible with one another in principle. There might be certain variations of it that are not compatible with one another, but there are certain variations of epigenetics and natural selection that is entirely compatible with one another. That, for
Yeah,
example,
give me a minute. I have someone calling me here at the door. Just a minute.
Yeah, Tangelo, we're gonna close the stream.
Okay.
Why?
Okay.
Shall
Okay, so
we
I'm coming
continue
back, and
next
I'm not,
week?
and I don't see you guys. Have a good one. Thank you for having me.
you.
All right,
Thank you.
Tangelo, thank you. All right, Madan, we're gonna take a few more comments probably, and then close the stream, right? One thing I will add to what Tangelo said, I think none of us is a biologist, and especially we don't understand much of genetics, and so we are probably not qualified to say one way or the other. But what our understanding comes from the wider scientific community, and what little, at least I have read. Madan probably has read a lot more than I have about these studies. So, but yeah, I mean, I can give you an answer on probabilities probably as to why probabilities don't seem right to me. But more than that, probably the kind of things Tangelo is discussing, I'm probably not qualified to talk about that.
So I mean, that's not the conclusions of evolution. The fact that we've evolved is not in question, but the exact mechanisms, natural selection, mutations, that's not necessarily even question. Is there, for example, accessory mechanisms? Of course, we think that's going to be lots more. It's a bit like learning about Newton and then also learning about Einstein, etc. They can go in hand, and maybe that's not the best comparison. So epigenetics, for example, could very well be not just could well be. That is what the frontiers of biologists on the frontiers think. For example, there might be genes that get turned on and off in particular environments, for example, and therefore the expression of that gene is not necessarily based on it being just selected for that particular error, right? It gets carried on.
You're saying there might be triggers basically for these.
Yes, there's triggers. Yeah. So these are triggers, for example, that expresses the particular gene. It turns off certain codons, turns on other areas of the gene.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally take that.
So,
I mean,
it produces proteins, etc. That is kind of roughly what epigenetics is. So therefore, there are certain phenotypical behavioral characteristics that are expressed in the lifetime of a member of one species that wouldn't be expressed in the next generation, perhaps, or in the offspring, if the environment has changed, simply because there's
I can agree
relationship,
to that.
relationship between the environment, inputs, etc., and the expression of that gene, which is completely compatible with natural selection. That natural selection selected certain genes that have this kind of variability to be switched on and off, but much better than other genetic genes or genetic codes that doesn't do that, because it's beneficial for the species to have that sort of thing. So they're compatible. So it's not. So this is not. I don't know what they mean by gene-centric view, right? But it's entirely compatible with Darwinian mechanisms of natural selection, etc., and this epigenetic sort of frontier that we're having. Those two things can be in harmony with together. Genes, natural selection selects for genes that can be turned on and off.
Right. I mean, yeah, I think, yeah, I would agree with that. I don't know why. Okay, Tangelo, you want to add something to it? But I think this is gonna spiral into a long conversation. It's already 3 hour, 2 minute mark. 3 minute mark.
Well, maybe we have another
Can you do you want to just sum up your points in maybe 1 minute?
Just address the last comment of Madin. Of course, I understand that he immediately got into the defense, but I mean, in the following stream we can go deeper into it, and until then, I should have also that paper I've actually writing it the second time to be more accurate. But the key argument here is that these systems, they work in a interdependent manner together. That means if one code or language doesn't have another code or system or mechanism in place, then it has no function. They work only synergistically. They work in a joint venture together. And explaining the origin of
What
just
system?
one,
What
when
system
it
you're talking
doesn't
about?
have an explanation, when it doesn't have a function on its own, is something which is a big barrier for
Yeah, but I
evolutionary
think what you're talking
scenarios.
about sounds like irreducible complexity, which has been, we have a lot of literature on attacking irreducible complexity.
All right.
Yeah,
I think
my point is
Madan,
that
Madan,
attacking
Otangelo,
doesn't mean that it has been successfully
or Madan
refuted.
and Otangelo, I think we'll leave this
Yeah,
discussion for now.
it has
And
been
for
successful though. I mean, even for the wealth of microbiologists, biologists says irreducible. The arguments for irreducible complexity are
Madan,
false.
Madan will take up this
Right?
challenge next.
Why is that?
Will
Why is it? Yeah, just 1 minute. 1 minute. Why is it the case that the
No,
vast majority of
Madan, it's not going to be 1 minute because it's going to spiral out of
no.
for another
I
10
want
minutes.
Antonio to think about it. Why is it that the vast majority of biologists come to a different conclusion, as well as philosophers of biology? They don't think
Yeah,
irreducible.
that's an argument ad populum, because the majority says so. It must be true.
No,
Of
no,
course,
no.
I
It's
don't
not.
agree with
It's not
that.
an argument ad populum. It's a good argument from authority. So an
Yeah,
argument ad populum.
then you will need to address the science which I'm presenting here. But
No. It's not.
as Philo
Anyway,
is saying, let's
anyway,
do that
Madan,
at another time.
yeah, Otangelo, I
Yeah.
think let's talk about this in
No,
our
it's not.
next.
It's not an argument ad populum, because an argument ad populum is when you. No. Argument ad populum is when you have unqualified masses. When you have qualified masses, that increases the probability for something to be correct. If,
Well,
for
just
example,
address my
you have
science in our next stream,
if,
and we'll
if,
talk.
I
if
think
for example, in a
we'll
court
discuss.
case, if, for example, in a court case, you have every scientist saying that the evidence for DNA shows that the DNA was belonging to the one person, that increases the reliability more than the fringe opinion on the side of an unqualified person. Of course it does, because we're talking about probabilities. Or ad populum is when I have 100 people outside my house believing in one thing. That's ad populum.
Madin, I will leave you this last word for you to think about.
No. I am also no. Let me just say this. I know, Antaglo. I have been addressing the science as well. I'm just giving you a number of different arguments. That's one argument that the vast majority of biologists don't think that. The second argument that we're going to go into, we're talking about the reasons as well, which is that the reasons for irreducible complexity are false, right? But how am I supposed to get this out if everybody's saying we need to go?
Okay, Martin, I will just leave you this last word that you can think about. And then in our next stream, you can give me an answer to this. What came first, DNA or the gene regulatory network, which regulates when genes have to be expressed? Okay, the next stream, you give me the answer. It doesn't have to be now. Just think about it.
It's a false dichotomy, basically. That's what the problem with irreducible complexity is.
It's not a false dichotomy. Don't answer me now.
We'll deal with it. We'll deal with it in the next stream. All right. Angelo, thanks for dropping by. And
thanks,
we'll definitely talk about it next time. Maybe, yeah.
Okay.
All right. We'll take up a few. We'll take up a few more comments, and then we'll.
Okay. I'll leave the stream. Have a good one. Bye bye.
All right, Angelo. Have a good one. Thanks. Come to. I think this one we already addressed, right? And come to Awazeha Uncensored. I think we are willing to come. We are, I think, Hussein, Oman, what do you think? I don't know, but who's this guy? Mike Mahal, there it is. One below is a Christian. Okay. I think one thing I wanted to say to this guy, ex-Hindu, Asur, I think what you can do is you can go and tell them that there is a channel, Philosapiens, and they would like to have you. They have cordial conversation, because on his channel, I think it's a machi bazaar, basically, right? and we have really sophisticated conversations. So you can just plug in our, that we have invited him for a philosophical conversation, and if he wants to, he can join in. Hussein Doman, yeah, I don't think Philo will take his Shahada anytime soon. What do you this is Mike Malsan. Okay, I think, all right, guys, time to say quits for now. We'll be available with another stream. We'll be here with another stream, most likely with a Hindu-Urdu stream over the weekend, but not sure. But if not, over the weekday, one of the weekday next week, we'll come up with another English stream. All right. So anyone who has not subscribed to our English-only channel, Unveiling Faith, please do so. Spread the word. Comment as much as you can, please, because so far we haven't been receiving many comments, and we haven't been receiving many views. So unless until you guys start supporting us with your comments, with your messages, with your buy me a coffee gifts or Patreon gifts, it's going to be a hard time for us to keep producing some excellent clips or streams, basically. So thank you once again, and see you next time. Good night.
All right. Good night.